topic one. Certain mobile carriers are planning on cracking down on spam text messages. To do so, they will require that organizations that send mass text to submit an application that will be used to create a trust score in quotes there, through the use of an unknown algorithm. Progressive organizations like the NAACP are arguing that this could severely degrade their ability to organize by text, which has become a major tool in their arsenal. They also say that the algorithm could be manipulated to favor organizations of certain political leanings. Do you think there is any truth to these claims, or is this essentially a conspiracy theory with no actual basis? Are algorithms, like the ones proposed, likely to produce discrimination? Is reducing text spam even a problem worth addressing? Yeah. So this is basically talking about bias embedded in technology, which people have strong opinions on, whether that's an actual thing or not. I'd love to know all of your opinions on this. So we'll start with our good friend Joe.
Yeah, campaign operatives believe, just to give some context, right? Campaign operatives believe that the more messages they send, the greater odds that you will act, you as in the consumer. They're betting one of those messages will hit you in the right way, just in the right time to shift you from an action to actually like opening your wallet and other things. However, some groups are sourcing outside of that opted base, right? So Donald Trump's presidential campaign was charged with violating the TCPA for that very thing by sending unwanted political text messages to cellular phones. Currently, marketers must receive prior express written consent for clients, also known as opting in, before texting them or adding them to subscriber lists. And I guess like the thought is right like, during COVID and after, we'll see a continued amplification of like these rollout processes and distance-based campaign measures. But I think it's up to phone companies to assure that organizations are not being excluded due to arbitrary algorithm exemptions. So I just wonder what people's thoughts are, but that's where I'm at on it.
Thanks so much. Okay, let's go to Layman.
I don't know anything about this topic, but usually when people talk about certain like social media companies and algorithms having political biases, I get really, really, really skeptical of whether or not it's something that's even like falsifiable or not. And I find that often in my interactions about events such as that, things tend to spiral into sort of conspiratorial territory. So even though when it comes to this particular thing, I'm not particularly knowledgeable on it, so I'm more so looking forward to listening to everybody else. But if people start saying things sound a little conspiratorial, I'm probably going to push back a little bit just to probe for some more information. So that's, yeah.
Counter points.
I am the conspiracy theorist that Layman was warning you about.
Fuck!
Shit! Nah.
Not you! Fuck!
No, I'm kidding. Basically, I think it needs to be opt-in is correct. I think absolutely correct. I think we need to. I understand the problems of it, right? So basically, like the further reach you have, the more people you reach out to, the increased statistics that people are actually going to do something when you send them messages, all that kind of shit. I understand their motivations, but at the same time, this is an inverse problem that I think Joe kind of alluded to, which is basically people get so bombarded with information that they don't look at things anymore. I don't check my spam messages. I don't check spam text messages. I don't check my mail unless it's from somebody that I'm expecting mail from. I don't check I send 90% of my email to spam or to trash because mostly it's just bullshit. It's things that I have no interest in. And what it's doing, what it's actually doing, it's diverting from my interests. So I become resentful. And then I don't even want, like, if I'm going to do something, I basically have to choose it consciously and then wade my way into my project. So while I understand the motivations of activists and they're probably just going to tell me some real politics shit about, reaching out to people, I would say, no, fuck that. It needs to be opt-in and you need to stop sending me fucking trash because you're actually negatively impacting my personal interaction with my communicative infrastructure. And on top of that, just speaking for me personally, you're decreasing the chances that I'm actually going to see your messages because I am constantly bombarded with bullshit. And I'll leave it there. Yield.
Okay, now let's go to Socrates.
All right, so this is something that I've actually dealt with. It kind of waxes and wanes, but I've had like periods of time where I get like several text messages a day, phone calls, the auto insurance one, the lady speaking Mandarin saying they've got a UPS package. Um, just all these different like scams and spams. It's pretty irritating. I would I would really like something to be done about that. However, maybe I am that conspiracy guy. I don't know, but I am actually pretty concerned about the idea of having some kind of vague algorithm with a score that's based on some kind of like data mining thing where we, have like good texts and bad texts, and we kind of do some machine learning on it, and we get some score, and we assign it to things going forward. That actually does concern me a lot, because we've seen this happen with Facebook, where pretty much just political speech generally gets kind of censored, which obviously it's kind of probably good if it's like bad conspiracy stuff. It's not good if it's just actual like leftist activism, anything. So I really am against that kind of vague idea. What I would really like to see is transparency. So I would really like to have a system where you can opt out. Like there's like to be able to send, if you're sending automated messages, you should be able to see who's sending it, like who's the actual organization behind it, opt out of that, and then have some kind of like heavy fines for if somebody has opted out and then a lot of people complain that this company is still sending them stuff. I would like that company to get fined. So I would like transparency. I would like some actual kind of like teeth behind a legislation. But I don't like the idea that it would be just kind of an algorithm.
Okay. And just a quick comment, like the moments that are always for me are during the campaigns, right? Like endless from progressive groups, right? Just like sending me like, leave me alone, fuck you guys. Holy shit, there's an
Stop.
Yeah,
Stop.
you keep saying stop and it just doesn't end. All right, sorry. Kevin Cassidy, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I think generally the move to try to crack down on spam, I can see why a lot of like mobile carriers and stuff would be interested in doing this, because it's an inconvenience to those that are consumers on their platform. But I think that worries about bias in the algorithms that are going to be employed is legitimate, and we know that in general there are kind of two sort of factors at here that you'd want to kind of consider, which is that yes, mass spam and everything can be used for good. It can also be used for bad, depending on who's putting it out, and that there should be some way to make sure that the mobile infrastructure, as well as other tech infrastructure in your country, isn't being used to serve the propagation of propaganda from your enemies, for example. But I don't trust social media companies or mobile carriers to kind of police themselves and be the arbiters of what counts as trustworthy. And we know that big tech in general has a bias to itself, and Facebook in the past, of course, worked with Cambridge Analytica, which dubious in terms of their connections with Russia, for example. I think that when it comes down to this, if you wanted to bypass this, all that you would basically have to do is just have a business relationship with any of these mobile carriers, and maybe you get a pass or something. I think that any sort of trust score would have to be basically government approved and universally applied. It can't just be something that private companies get to determine. Is this spam or is this something that should go out or whatnot? They have basically their two biases are, well, their main bias, in fact, is to make money as much money as possible. And what does that lend itself to? Well, it depends. Do you have the right connections with those firms? Because, obviously Cambridge Analytica had the right connections with Facebook in order to get info for, without anybody's consent, for example. I'm dubious when it comes to any of these big tech companies or cell phone providers, et cetera, that they're going to actually police things in a way that is actually objectively good. I think that the business interest, as well as potential basically political bribes, could actually get in the way of that to game the system in favor of one side over the other, basically. And that usually, at least in past experiences, tends to favor super far left and super far right talking points that ultimately undermine faith and trust in American as well as Canadian and British democracy. So thanks.
Much. Next, Ninetales.
Yeah, a lot of good points made. One of the good ones is that we will kind of need this for COVID. I never thought about that. Campaign mobilization, it makes sense. Shit, I actually wrote that down as a note in response to Joe, but I forget what you said honestly about it, so I'm just gonna move on. Definitely, I'm worried that like this will lose its effect over time. Even more so, like obviously, all the companies that make operating systems for your phones are going to start creating like spam folders for your text messages because they know that that's what people want. Um, I really think that this should only be for essential services. Amber Alert is a great example. Disaster response and emergency response is important too. I think even voting can be pretty useful. So I think parties should be able to reach out to their voting bases that way if people opt in. Um, I'm not a big fan of us being advertised to in text necessarily. I don't want this to be the future Rumble world where literally you're getting advertisements in your dreams. So I think we need to draw a line, and like our personal communications is a pretty big line in my opinion. As far as like if we were to do this with algorithms, or like at least catching people who are attempting to spam text, I'm not too scared about the algorithms because I'm not basing my fears on what I don't know, and B, consumer text is nothing like spam. They're just incredibly different formats. The worst thing you're going to have is someone spamming emojis at somebody, and I'm pretty sure like we can single those things out. Um, and you know, like there's no reason we can't just have something be flagged and then have like an actual person deal with it instead of just fatalistic action taking place because the algorithms got triggered. So in general, I think we should be catching spam messages, and I think it should only be reserved for the most essential things.
These get weird when people are spamming the purple emoji, the purple food emoji at you.
The eggplant emoji.
Eggplant,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's supposed to be a dick.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a little weird. I'm just saying that would be a little weird. That would be a little weird. But okay. And then and like the water emoji too, right? Like, it's like, all right. I don't know why are you doing this to me? What are you trying to tell me? Let's go to Kobe.
Yeah. I don't really know a lot about like the analytics of like organizing online. Don't really know how much these like text messages matter. So obviously if they were like really, really quintessential to like these organizations like organizing, that'd be a big deal. But I wonder if it is, because as we've all kind of said here, at least anecdotally, like none of us pay attention to them, and like anything that comes to the spam we immediately ignore. And I wonder if even like there's been an opposite effect, that by using the spam email, people just associate these organizations with spam. But I was looking through the article. I noticed a pretty interesting thing at the very end. So, like, number one, it seems like this is like an opt-in, opt-out thing that certain carriers are going to do and certain carriers are not going to do. It says that Verizon has like said they haven't said if they're going to do it yet, but T-Mobile seems like they're going to. And later on, it says the CEO of WMC Global said in an email that the company's role was only vetting businesses, not vetting political organizations or nonprofits. So I don't know if he's trying to say that they're not going to be like looking at the text messages from this. So I mean, on the surface of it, I don't like the idea of the private market regulating the private market. That seems kind of cringe. So I don't like the idea that like, we'll have this capitalist business will come that will fix the market. That doesn't seem to ever be true. I would rather just like, if we're going to do this sort of legislation, let's just do it on the federal level. Then we can make sure that groups like the NCP, et cetera, are not affected by it. You know, so I don't know.
Thanks so much. Next, let's go to Killer C.
Really fast to Ninetales' point, when it comes to advertisements, you don't want to have advertisements in your dreams. I just want to say, you haven't woken up yet to Alexa whispering to you all these sweet ads in your sleep yet. Okay, with Kobe's thing, it's any group that has an issued EIN number, so any organization that the government recognizes. But essentially, this is just allowing companies to do application to peer response, A2P. With A2P, though, people can abuse it and it gets cumbersome, just like what Socrates and PrimeCayes is talking about. I actually had a friend that got harassed by the Democrat Party in our state, even though, because what they would do is they call you and they say, "Is this Sarah?" Then they go, "No, this is Jack." And then they now have all of your information. And then they just start spam calling you and going, "Hey Jack, guess what? Guess what? We have a new event for you, broski." He's like, "I'm not even a Democrat, I'm a Republican. Can you just stop, please? I'm trying to be polite to you guys even." But so and this is really to me a natural inclination for cell phone companies to keep their customers. In the end of the day, if you do not want to use their services because you don't want to deal with all the spam, then they're going to try to figure out how to stop you from having to deal with all the spam. Saying all that though, I haven't heard anything with the AI until what PrimeCayes have given me with the article. But with AI, we also have to remember that naturally this AI is designed to discriminate. And when I say discriminate, I mean discriminate against unwanted messages. But with that, you run into problems like the Google facial recognition showing racial bias, which I think Joe Lewis is probably very well aware of, where they made the facial recognition bot. It worked, I think, like 95% effective for white people. And then when you had people of different racial groups, especially black people, it had a very low working rate. And so you run into this essential problem, which Facebook even ran into with their own AIs, where your question really is what's the AI thinking when it sees something? And the real answer is we don't know. All you can do with AI is you give it information or data, then you test to see if the outputs reflect what you desire from your inputs. But you don't know the whole process inside.
Twitter's kind of like that too. Like if you upload
Opening
a photo.
beans.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know we were still in openings.
Killer, you can finish.
That was really it. Layman can just go in for layman.
No, it's okay. I was taking a shit. That's where I went. I didn't know we were still in intro.
Oh, it's up until
Okay, this is all me then. This is all me. So Kobe and Killer. Wait, I forgot what Kobe said. I'm having the worst time retaining information. But yeah, as far as Killer is talking about, well, first of all, you're not talking about artificial intelligence. It's nowhere near artificial intelligence. Just basically just a detection algorithm. It's not meant to mimic anything near intelligence. Secondly, they don't think, they don't see. We do know what happens when we put an input and what the output is. That's why we make them. That's why we use them. We wouldn't make them or use them if we didn't know what the outputs were based on various inputs. So you can't say that we don't know. You don't know, but the people who engineer them and run them do.
Really fast. I'm actually one of the people that engineer and run them. And I don't get me wrong. This is a whole nother topic on AI. But for AI, you actually do not know, especially if you do something like neural networking.
Yeah, they're not using neural networks to do this. They're literally just they're literally just no, but they're not doing neural networks. There's no way they need neural networks for this.
It's like machine learning. It's not AI.
They need linear algebra, maybe, and some calculus at best.
Okay, well, for those of you who kind of like got lost there or whatever, there's actually a great video by CGP Grey that talks about like AI learning, and it basically talks about how like it's not a process that we are actually in control of. AI learning is basically like, do we you send a computer after a task, and then it kind of does this like Darwinian self-selection thing.
Okay, well,
where
we're
it just
going
keeps
into this
selecting.
rabbit hole for no reason.
We don't have to go down this rabbit hole.
AI.
I'm just trying to help out people who are unaware of the rabbit hole. That's all I'm trying to do. We don't have to go down it ourselves.
Sorry, I'm just going to point out one last time. This algorithm is not going to be learning, most likely. They're most likely just going to give it certain parameters that it identifies and then either notifies somebody or takes action.
Sure,
but that's fine. When you guys said artificial intelligence, I thought you guys meant really crazy stuff, not just algorithms.
I literally said it's not.
Okay, Jesus. All right, so the threat that people brought up that I actually hadn't considered that I thought was the most interesting part of the intros was basically it's not a question of whether or not whether or not this should be done or spam or opt in, opt out. That's not even the interesting part. The interesting part is, do we let private companies create a social credit score that then they get to enforce? We have no ability to determine what that social credit score is, and then they can use it for nefarious purposes to manipulate politics for whatever means they want. So if they have a right-leaning bias, they could go after lefties and basically ban the ACLU or the NAACP. Or if they're left-wing, then they could ban conservatives and they could ban libertarians, and they could basically say, the Republican Party actually has a really low social credit score, so we're not going to give them the ability to use spam text messaging because this franchise, that franchise all have low social credit scores, and no, you can't see the mathematics that we're using to determine this algorithm.
But have they done that?
No, but it's potential for abuse.
There's nothing stopping them. They probably already have.
Sure.
like there's really no incentive for them not to do it, and I can't imagine what it would look like to stop them from doing it. But yeah, like, is it ideal? I guess it depends on the corporation and what they're trying to measure.
Yeah,
Listen,
this
I tried to show in my inaugural Twitch stream, I had a conservative on my show, and they showed me Hunter Biden's dick, and I got banned. Okay, so they're already trying to censor conservatives.
You hate to say
True.
this whole thing has been going on for a while, though. Not so much in mobile carriers, but in big tech, which most tend to be clustered around Silicon Valley due to clustering externalities. They just it happened to emerge there. That's the center of gravity. And what does that mean? Well, big tech has by and large inherited the biases that come with being located in a very far left political center, as far as U.S. politics goes, at least. And we've seen that on YouTube, especially, but as well as other social networks. You can say pretty insane stuff, and if you are far left or pretty left, you'll get the benefit of the doubt. But if you're somebody who's generally right wing, you might get your entire channel and your presence shut down. And so I am not a fan of Nick Fuentes. I've covered Nick Fuentes many times on my show. He's basically gone down this Nazbol rabbit hole, but he got banned for a lot of the far right stuff that he said. Yet other people have said pretty far left stuff, and they're still around. I mean, you can look at somebody like Vosh, who said in the past that it'd be great to nuke Tel Aviv, nuke Israel, basically. He's still around. And so it begs the question, of course, where's the bias going to be? Now, mobile carriers, it's a little bit different. You could say, well, maybe that'll balance out a little bit. But my point generally is that I don't want private firms who are led by individual people with, their own political biases. YouTube, the executives there have a really far left bias. I don't want them to basically determine what's acceptable thought. I don't trust them to do it. And I also don't trust them to not take bribes and everything else, such as Facebook has done in the past. And so it's not even about whether you're left wing or right wing, because you might say, well, if I'm on the left, I'm going to be okay with this because they're shutting down right wing voices and everything. Understand that over time, the Overton window of what's acceptable will come closer and closer into your court before now maybe they turn against you. Who knows? And so it really does beg the question of, if these firms have so much power to influence our sort of political discourse in Canada, the United States, as well as other Western democracies, should there be legislation passed to basically force neutrality in terms of their political judgments? And so if we're going to have a trust score and everything, I think at some level it would have to be mandated at the federal level that this is going to apply on basically a utility basis. In other words, we're not going to censor you if you have a left-wing opinion or a right-wing opinion. All that we're going to do is to say, is this organic? Is this something that's not being paid for by the Russians to undermine us? But apart from that, we're not going to shut down your speech, basically. That would be what we would ultimately be interested in here, because otherwise you run into a situation where a few corporate technocrats basically control what everybody, not just is what they're allowed to think, but over time what they'll be born with the options of thinking, which goes from the 1984 scenario to the Aldous Huxley scenario.
Thank you. I just want to let some other people in, but thank you so much, Kobe. Joe, and then Ninetales.
Yeah. So a couple of things I wanted to respond to. Just the most last one. 1984 was a scenario in which the government controlled everything. It's like a private market. So I don't know. 1984 is like a great comparison. I would also say like Vosh did get in trouble. He was banned for a year, right, from Twitch, and like lost a ton of revenue. So like I don't know. Again, like I don't really know the idea that like this idea that like the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was Silicon Valley like ruling class people convincing them that they're like progressives. Okay, I live in the Bay Area. I went to school with some of the kids of these people. They're not progressive. Okay, they don't want to hang gay people, but they're not progressive in any meaningful way. Okay, and also if you go outside of the outside, and also if you look at these tech companies, why if these are so left wing, why is it in any other country other than America? You go on Facebook and like the #1 post is like the president of that country being like, "Come out to town square, we're going to kill all Jews." Like far right infiltration on these social media networks outside of America is a massive problem. Look into how Facebook contributed to the Myanmar to the conflict in Myanmar. Right? So I don't know. This idea that the far left, it's the far left problem, seems a little silly. I don't know.
Okay, Joe. You can quickly respond, and then we'll go to Joe, Ninetales, and then Counter.
Yeah. I just had one quick thing on that. You can be progressive in a U.S. context and support, say, gay rights, but then also shill for, say, Iran abroad. The progressive left in America does that all the time. They constantly side against Israel. They constantly do things. Look at Kremlin Kyle Kalinske, for example. His channel might as well be the channel where we defend the terrorists and the Ayatollah. Continually, he's very pro gay rights, pro-progressive within the United States, and then ask him any question abroad, and he always sides with the most retrograde, anti-American enemies out there, from Russia to Iran to Syria and so on and so forth.
So
Listen,
It's almost as if American exceptionalism sucks.
I'll just say we can come together and we can agree. Kyle Kalinske is a fucking moron. Okay, so
Kevin, we've only just met, and I don't agree with much of what you're saying, but I like you a lot already. I hope you come back already. We're gonna have a lot of fun.
He's saying that before the fight comes.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see.
You're gonna be screaming at him in
No, I
10 minutes.
cannot wait. Joe, Ninetales, and then Counter.
Yeah, Kobe kind of knocked on it. Like, these content creators have seen repercussions for their behavior and conduct. And I think something that gets kind of reductive is this idea that, like, there's one side that gets more suspended or restricted than the other. I think something that we could do that's a bit more productive is talk, like, if we're going to talk about bans and suspensions, like, what are the things that these individuals did that led to their suspensions and things on certain platforms, right? Because I think one of the problems is people are quick to say, like, well, it's just because they were conservative or just because they're far left. And it's like hang on. There's certain things that you can't say within certain channels on the internet, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, what have you. Like, for God's sakes, Destiny's on his 7th Twitter account.
Destiny's
I can't
friend,
think-
okay? That's not Destiny, all right?
I can't think of a single tanky that's able to keep their Twitter account for more than a year. Like, I feel like if you keep your account more than a year, you get a fucking medal at the end of it and then a tank in your backyard.
No, you get called a Fed. That's what you get.
Yeah, like
Yeah, it's the CIA,
Exactly.
yeah.
I think what ends up happening is that if all the tankies on Twitter keep their Twitter accounts for a year, just Stalin comes back to life for one day. Like, I think they're trying really hard, but they're a little too horny.
That's when I become pro big tech. I'm like,
but
listen,
to cycle back to the
keep that motherfucker dead.
conversation, however, something that is a thought, because ground groups or ground activist groups do use text communication for individuals who might not want to do like the opt-in for all types of things. So what that looks like is no, it's cool, we can get it.
Spam
Okay.
call.
Jesus, the DNC, am I right? Basically, what ends up happening is that, like, what ends up happening is that you'll see situations where maybe the organizer will send like a handful of texts during like a span of like a couple of weeks, and then maybe it'll stop. But then tech companies will catch that and be like, wait, like, why are you mass sending like 50 or 60 messages to these individuals like at the same point of every day? We ran into this problem with our marching band where they thought that we were like an activist group, and it's like, no, we use text communication to organize rehearsals, and it just happens that it comes out at the exact same time. Granted, now, like, for school and education, it's a little bit different because of FERPA and stuff like that. But one of my concerns, I think Connor brought it up in his opening as well, is that how do we make sure that if organizations are going to do these things, I think there needs to be like different ways that individuals can opt in, but transparency as to what that looks like, because you don't want to run into a situation that Killer brought up where you get a phone call. The phone call could be a purposeful mischaracterization, like, is this is this Karen? And it's like, no, this is Carl. And then it's like, oh, we already knew this was Carl. We're going to consider that opting in, and then you're stuck with that. Because we are going to see the shift between email correspondence to text correspondence. And that's the part of it where it's like, if we're going to be in a world where our smartphones are going to be attached to us, we're going to have to deal with this sort of campaigning via phone somewhere.
So we'll move on to Ninetales and Connor, but I just wanted to say something quickly because it brought up what Killer had said previously. That here's the play, everyone, right? When you get like those calls, right? So they'll have calls where they don't say anything. I'm sure we all have received those calls, right? Where you get nothing, right? What they're doing is they're listening for your response, right? And so if you answer the call, and you're you say like, well, hello, my name is Prime, right? Like, or it's like not hello.
They read your voice.
You just say hello. So you say hello, right? Hello. Yep. Then they know it's residential. If you say like, well, this is Prime Bank, right? Well, they know now it's a business because that's how you answer phones there. I say literally nothing when I get those. I don't when everyone calls me, I wait for them to if I don't know the number, I wait for them to say something first before I say anything. So that's the play for that. And then also, I think for this conversation, just referring to Joe, is that it's not the problem of opting in. I mean, like, because it is what it is. People opt in for all the things. Like, oh, yeah, give me promotional information, right? And then they have your email address and they sell that. It's opting out, I think, is the big problem. Is that you can't actually get yourself out. Once you're in, you're done. It's gone because it's already been sold like 20 times. Ninetales, I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, yeah. So got a few things on there. First of all, you can start equating this to thought policing when they're actually deleting people's people's personal text. This has nothing to do with thought policing. Regarding how we protect Democrats versus Republicans in this, we make this open to all people who are actively in a campaign to reach out to people who have opted in to be messaged by their campaign. We only need these algorithms if we open this up to like to the free market. But in reality, like if we restrict this to very exclusive pre-approved functions, then we can subvert this need entirely and ease the annoyance of consumers at the same time. I do want this for voting. It's been shown that like when you can remind people to vote, even just a day or two before, the numbers increase greatly. And people who do vote often were reminded, and people who don't vote often weren't. I can't remember the exact numbers I read earlier, but it'll come up later, and it's very important. And as far as the Kyle Kulinski thing goes, like his problem is that he's a centrist and he's a bootlicker. Although I'll give him this much credit, he doesn't play into the American exceptionalism dogma, and that makes him better than anybody who does. So I'm sorry if you do. That kind of sucks to be you.
Oh boy.
He's not a centrist. He's not a centrist.
Well, then I'm sorry. Then you have a really bad analysis on politics.
Oh boy.
Whoa!
See, the love fest is starting already.
Shots fired.
Again, Kevin, you're so welcome here. You're so welcome.
I'm a debate me bro, man. You want to debate me, bro. You gotta debate me, bro.
I will toss other people off for you, Kevin. I'm loving you already. Connor.
All right. Well, we can get into like I don't want to. I hope we can avoid it. We might not be able to, but we can get into the who's more canceled on the internet, the right wing or the left wing, and then we can just take out our respective metaphorical sex organs and start like measuring them with rulers and shit. No, but for the sake of productivity, I'll try to leave that alone for now. No, this is the question though. So moving past like partisan who's more canceled and who's more fucked on the internet, like basically the question is who has power and why. And the thing that I find interesting about this is, basically Superpower Broadcasting said something that is very interesting, and I think we all need to acknowledge that we're a part of it, whether we're on the left or on the right. I log into Twitter to get angry, because I like being recreationally angry. I like seeing people saying bad things, getting mad at them, quote tweeting them or subtweeting them or screenshotting them, and then basically saying, hey, look at this fucking asshole. I like going on Facebook because I like jumping into my groups who share nerdy hobbies with me, and then basically seeing what everybody is doing in their nerdy hobbies. That's why I like jumping on Facebook. And what I'm concerned with, that I think has been brought up, is that basically the algorithms that feed us our serotonin, our dopamine, our hate chemistry, all that kind of stuff, it's all being rigged intentionally so our attention spans do not leave the digital device. I am a complete cell phone addict. I'm a complete digital addict. And what I think Superpower kind of chipped away at a little bit is the fact that, and leftists should be concerned about this as well, is that our attention spans can be drawn away from very important things and be drawn to very stupid things. So basically, just using an example, we all argue more about Hunter Biden's penis and the quality of it than whether or not the Biden family is corrupt. And then we argue more about whether or not the right wing just have a hate boner for the Biden family, rather than do we have laws in this country that allow incredibly rich and powerful people to gain undue influence, and whether or not our entire system is corrupt. And instead of discussing like, should the Clintons have a fucking charitable organization that can be donated to by exterior governments? Should our fucking politicians be able to buy stock options at IPOs and then become worth $200 million overnight because they were offered IPOs? Instead of having a conversation about public corruption, we have a conversation about who has it worse on the internet. And the answer is conservatives. That way we can fight about that instead of important things.
Anyone else?
I will make a plea that sounds like a fucking boring conversation, and I'd be really more interested to talk about my big brain conversation topic from earlier. Why should we allow the free market to regulate the free market? Seems as if we want to deal with something like text messages like this. We have this thing called the Gooberment, and they can come in and we can make sure that we're not allowing like little charities to not be able to get people to do what they need to do, and also we're not allowing the Mandarin person that annoys Socrates to call them and annoy Socrates, right? I feel like we can do this. I feel like we have the technology. Why are we allowing a Quincy Q capitalism to do it?
Socrates,
or even sorry.
Yeah. So first of all, just vote. Don't say anything, but raise.
Oh no, Socrates. Oh no! Oh boy!
This is
the sequel.
Oh boy!
I think
This is the
He went
sequel
full
to
robot.
Socrates' death.
Oh man!
I think the cell phone companies caught on.
Apparently,
They did.
They
They were like, we need to
yeah.
shut this fucking guy up. He's about to fucking whistleblow on us. We need to get him the fuck out of here right now.
Right.
Oh my god!
it.
Oh, there you go.
Did you see that just happen?
Yeah.
That was them.
Uh,
That was them. 100%. It
All
can't
right,
be a
The girlfriend
coincidence.
called it in. I'm sorry.
Coincidences have never happened. So okay. So,
Lefties on the internet have it worse. I
if
rescinded my
you
earlier
can
comment.
start over from the very beginning.
okay. All right. So very quickly, everybody, just raise your hand if you're on board with having a transparent system where you individually can opt in and opt out, and there's no algorithm whatsoever. I just want to see where everybody's kind of head is at. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm making too much of a centrist, but I just don't know enough about all this kind of stuff to be able to sign on.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't want to push you into it. Okay. And so now raise your hand if you would be okay having an algorithm, but it literally only is for like fraudulent kind of like spoofed calls, like something that's actually not what it claims to be, but nothing to do with like the actual content really of what it is. Raise your hand in that case.
I
don't
love
know how you would
even. I
Yeah, that's the whole convo, right? Is that the whole convo? Is like what businesses are that or what?
Sure. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
No,
Yeah.
trust me.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So it's just
Go ahead,
interesting.
Socrates.
So I think it's very, very important that that we don't implement a new complicated, convoluted system that nobody will understand or trust, that could end up growing and sprawling and going in all these directions of just this kind of scope creep of like, oh, hey, we added a new feature where it'll kind of start blocking lefty things. Subscribe to this kind of block list. And now, you can kind of, I think that this guy has good blocks. I'll subscribe to him. Something that gets very, very easy to opt into, something that just shifts you along some kind of ideological spectrum that's the kind of thing that I just don't think there's any good that can come of that, really. And also superpower broadcasting, I would love to debate you about Israel or some shit sometime. It sounds like that would be really fun.
I feel
Yeah,
like
so
this.
just shoot me a DM on Twitter or email my YouTube page, and we will schedule a debate. I have an open debate policy, so
Yeah,
I'd love to.
sick. Okay. Yield.
I feel like that partisan example you gave happens very rarely in like the mass media kind of communication area. Maybe on social media, but that's because that's kind of what social media is for in a sense, if you think about it in a certain light. But like when it comes to sending out mass text or something like that, I don't think there's any precedent to assume they're just going to suddenly become partisan out of nowhere.
Wait, is that to me? Because
Yeah, you gave like the blocking lefties example. Maybe I misinterpreted
yes.
that.
So here's like a very I think everyone will agree this is a really reasonable scenario, which is that if this becomes something that's possible to do, if even something that kind of seems individualized, like so you can imagine like if I can individually block things, and somebody else can individually block things or opt into things, then somebody I like could build a block list, and they could say, hey, download my block list, or maybe there'd be a way to automatically subscribe to it. And then you're now part of a system that you basically trust, because you've said, I'm tired of this hassle. I don't want to deal with this. Take care of it for me. And they can kind of shift that in whatever direction is possible. And suddenly you're in this place where you don't realize it's the same way that, you know, people who don't know that like your Google is different from my Google, and when we Google, we see totally different things, like scary shit like that can just you know, for better for worse, I don't like an obfuscated system like that.
Yeah, so like my problem is like you said that like someone you like would just suddenly make a list and then suddenly people would be blocked off of this. This is a non sequitur to me. Like I don't see how that happens. Like you need to give me an example of somebody with the power to do this, why they would want to do this, and how this catches on to become the norm when obviously people are going to push back against it, no matter what side they try to cut out. So I just need a more realistic scenario for me to be able to entertain that idea.
Okay,
Can
let
I
me give
say
just
something really fast.
Sure.
Adblock does this.
What I'm confused by is, are you okay with the fact that people have that someone, whoever it is, even if we don't know their intentions, just have the ability to do this? Like to me, I wouldn't feel okay with that.
Me?
For me, the ability or the fact that someone is capable of doing that, whatever their intentions are, or if they are doing that, that's scary to me.
I would call that fear reasonable if it's also reasonable to assume someone would abuse that power. That's why I'm holding Socrates' feet to the fire to give me like a viable example.
So I mean, I don't know if you'll consider this like a dodge. I hope that this will be like something that feels like an analogous situation, but what you brought up with social media. So when it comes to like Facebook, right? So I have people who are, you know, very kind of like radical lefty. They do crazy shit like, you know, give lectures and write books and stuff. And they've been like blocked off of Facebook, you know, temporarily banned, whatever. There are people who are like shadow banned. And it seems like the reason that this kind of thing happens is that there's an amount of trust that people are willing to outsource to somebody who can take care of some of the having to see things that they don't like, right? Deal with some of the annoyance for me, and I'll let you take care of it because you're providing a service. And that's obviously, I think we'd agree that can have negative consequences with social media. It feels like this would be a situation that could go in that same kind of direction, and I don't see anything that would specifically stop it.
And Ninetales, I'll give you another more specific example. Adblock, the original Adblock extension for like Firefox and Google Chrome, that does exactly what he's talking about. That's what I thought he was talking about when he first brought this up. Is that like you could just download the Adblock extension, right, and it would do its best. But then there are other lists that you could subscribe to that had more specific blocks for like different types of ads. And that just did it for you. That's why I thought he was referring to.
Was there like an anti-lefty list there, or an anti-right winger list? Because if there was, I'm okay with that. But I would say that like the social media thing is not quite a dodge; it's a false equivalency. Where like on social media, first of all, we have a social environment that we need to regulate in order for it to be like civil. And one of the things that drastically changes the social media environment is advertisers and the need for these platforms to be advertiser friendly. So I think the example you gave with your extreme lefty friends, some of that might be like bias against leftism, but it'd be so
Oh, no,
hard to tell because
no,
you
I don't
can't tell if they were
yeah.
shadow banned because they made a post that was like not good for like advertisers. You can't tell if they were
Mhm.
banned because of something they said to somebody in a comment section that you didn't even see. So I don't like, again, as far as example goes, I need like I need like a specific, like I need to be able to picture the threat instead of like this abstract thing where like anything can happen.
So just to be clear, and I'm sorry, I don't want to like manipulate or like kind of take over the whole back and forth, but so just to be clear, I'm not saying that there's specifically like an anti-lefty bias that caused this person to be banned, shadow banned, whatever. But it seems to be the case. It seems like on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, there's a lot of sex worker shadow bans and bans, which is really bad. Um, it seems like there's kind of like an anti more radical or more like kind of politically involved statements generally. And I don't like the idea that these would be kind of tacitly, like silently, quietly kind of removed from the public sector. I don't like that idea.
Let's go to Connor.
Yeah, so just to bring up an example, because I do understand that you're saying that like text messaging or phone communications is maybe not analogous in this circumstance, because like social media very specifically is like you're going out to fuck with people, right? You're going out to talk to people, like you're going out to have communicative relationships with different communities and all that kind of stuff. So that seems like something that's built in, whereas the cell phone is it's your personal communication, and it's how you interact basically with more your IRL people than like your social media groups. And I understand that. That's why I was a big fan of the opt-in, opt-out, because I think there's other technologies that allow us to do the same thing better than text messaging. But inventing nefarious scenarios in my own head, because I'm very good at that, because I'm a bad person, is basically like, so I would see shadow bans potentially happening for political organizations that tech companies basically have beef with. So for instance, we brought up the NAACP, we brought up the ACLU, we brought up a few of those, and basically whether it's a tech company, if they had a private social credit system, and it's you were actually bringing up like, hey, can I have tangible evidence for why we should be afraid of these things? And the truth is we can't, because when we go for the analogous things in social media like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all these like shadow bans or whatever, we have no idea what criteria are being used. We have no way in which to appeal. We have no way in which for our appeals to be basically rectified in a way that we see fit. I'll give you another disanalogous example. Copyright strikes. I do fair use content all the time. I do reaction stuff all the time. And basically I will get copyright struck, 30-day appeal, and then basically have to do a second appeal in order for my shit to be unlocked. And like, it's like, bro, like you're fucking with my content. You're fucking with my time. There's no appeals process. I can't prove to you that I'm a good faith actor. I can't prove to you that I'm going on. And there's no way for me to know why I'm randomly getting fucked. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. So I would say that, like, okay, give me a second. I lost my train of thought there for whatever reason.
I talked a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would say that like, the reason that I don't like slippery slopes is because we're deriving a solution from this that's based on what we don't know. And what I posit is that if we did know what this would look like, then maybe we'd actually be able to come up with realistic solutions instead of just avoiding the entire thing. Now,
Yeah.
remember, I said that like my personal solution to all of this is to just make it for essential services only, and like essentially these people would be pre-vetted before they could even do this, and all other spam.
Could you expand on what you mean by that? Because you've said a few times, I didn't know what you actually meant. Make this for essential services. So, like, are you
Sure.
saying that? Yeah, could you explain that?
Emergency disaster responses, Amber Alerts are a great example. Voting,
But
it's-
I'm asking. I don't know what you mean. Like this. Like those
the
emergency responses.
mass texting service.
So like they only only emergency services can mass text. Like you're saying, like that's
Nope.
it. Is that what you're saying?
No,
I'm
I said
confused.
there are multiple ways that it can be used. It can be used for voting as well, and Amber Alerts.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Okay. So
and
you're just limiting to them. All right.
you could put stuff out there, and maybe I'd be convinced that it's essential. But this would make it so we hardly even need algorithms to determine if like a spammed text service is essential or not, because we already have a list of people who should be doing it. But as far as like this slippery slope and just creating like this general solution for a problem that's too vague to exist, I'd rather wait for the problem to exist and then make a solution accordingly.
No,
Yeah, super hate that.
sorry, direct response. Like this is like frog in the fucking pot logic. No, like you need to nip this shit in the bud. And I'll tell you exactly
you
where
don't.
we. Yes, you do.
Okay, is
so-
society collapsing because we didn't
Okay,
regulate
hold
Twitter
on.
enough?
Hold on, because okay. So I'll tell you where you're at or where we're at. Because I will basically I will tell you where we're at right now, because this isn't a slippery slope. This is what's happening right now in the realm of social media, and we're talking about a new frontier as far as technology goes. So I understand that you're saying it's disanalogous. I'm saying it's not. Okay, when you're talking about social credit scores, when you're talking about mass communication, these are not disanalogous. I disagree with it. So let's move on from there. Okay.
But the reason I don't like it is
okay. I
because
don't care. I'm moving on.
because it assumes that there is no specific solution.
Okay, can
when
you
there could
extend me
be.
some charitability? Can you extend me some charitability? Just follow
Not
me on
when
my
I
logic
can't
tree.
use your analogies.
Okay, I don't care. I'm moving on. So I'll do it for everybody else then.
I thought you
So,
said this was
okay,
just a quick response.
Sure, and I'll try to keep it under 60 seconds. So basically, where we're at right now is fringe dissidents. I can think of a few people. A few people's names are coming to my head. So Stefan Molyneux, Lauren Southern, Gavin McInnes, Milo Yiannopoulos, a whole bunch of like right-wing firebrands are either shadow banned, they're kicked off the platform. Most normie conservatives, TPUSA, anti-racist people who just like the free market and they like to fuck brown and black people through economics rather than overt racism, they're allowed to participate in the marketplace of ideas. Okay, that's where we're at right now. That's where the Overton window is. When it comes to lefties, it seems like Stalinist, Othcoms, people who apologize for genocide, all that kind of stuff, they can play around in the social media algorithm for a little bit, and then they'll get the fucking boot, and then they'll get the axe. It does seem like it's tolerated a little bit more from a conservative perspective, but at the same time, it does seem like they'll get the axe eventually. This is actually an acceptable Overton window for me personally. Like if I was in charge of the world, this is actually the Overton window that I would want. But I'm a liberal with conservative sympathies. So okay, yeah, you're right. I'm long-winded, my bad. But my concern is not whether or not a structure is working for my political party. My concern is whether or not a structure can function properly if the worst person in the world was in control of it. So if Donald Trump was in charge, like all the corporations were like, Donald Trump's the best thing since sliced bread. We want to suck his dick. He's going to do fucking everything for us for the rest of time. What would happen with this algorithm and these social media controls? And that's my concern.
Yeah, so I already pointed out that this dynamic of extremists being shadow banned or whatever is most likely explained by advertising, which isn't a big deal on text messaging. In fact, if you get rid of the advertising element, it gets even better.
Wait, I think it could be though. There's a monetary aspect to that because there's.
But that's what I'm saying. There shouldn't be.
Let's go to Joe Lewis.
What do you nationalize AT&T? I mean, yeah. But...
Yeah.
So the problem.
Fuck off with your nationalization.
The issue here, and I'm with Connor on this, is that when you make sort of exemption lists using algorithms, it's going to make it very difficult for organizations to even know that they're being exempt in the first place. So what you'll see, which is a total possibility under a system of trust score, is that you think that you're functioning where your individuals are just sending, like you're just texting individuals that are in your opt-in list as a way that you see fit. In practice, however, people aren't getting your messages. And then when you go into the analytic side of like seeing what things people are responding to and nobody's responding to anything, is like, okay, am I on an exempt list, or are the messages that we're doing not targeted enough? And then it creates
it clearly wouldn't work out that way, right? Because
this is why we're arguing about trust score.
You would know that you can only send
about trust score.
Yeah, you would know you can only spam.
Yeah.
You would know you can only send spam text if you're on the list, and you wouldn't be disillusioned by the fact that you can if you're not on the list. Therefore, not having this like shadow bannable system is the solution.
Okay, so listen, the idea of lists is just not a good take, and like respectfully,
know,
like we got to be careful. We have to be
hard to
very.
Think about when it sounds scary.
Let Joe finish.
No, it's not hard to think about when it sounds serious. It's not hard to think about when it sounds stupid. Like to be honest here, I understand the idea of essential services through tech, but this is getting so far into the weeds. Like we already have precedent of what happens. This is why I brought up the Trump campaign in my argument earlier. Is that when he got sued from the TCPA, it was shown that the reason why these text messages were unwanted was because of the categorization of cell phones. Categorization of cell phones is very odd and murky. And then they clarified what that was to essentially include smartphones. And the case two cases that I'm talking about here is Marks v. Crunch San Diego, and then whatever Trump's campaign name is, which name escapes me right now, versus the individual's name. I forget his name. Will come back to me in a bit. But the main thing is that it now extends to smartphones, so you can fall under certain capacities of like not necessarily being able to opt in actively under cell phones. It's a long thing. I'll put it in the chat after, so we can like have a read of it after, maybe a conversation after the point of this conversation. But the thing is that I don't think lists are going to create the kind of outcomes that we're looking for. So if I understand that this is a compromise, what are the potential consequences of the compromise? I'm totally down to have the conversation of trying to brainstorm of like, okay, what are potential consequences with this compromise? But we have to understand on its face that I shouldn't have called it stupid, but the idea of lists is not a solution; it's just a compromise. And then, okay, what are the consequences of that?
Okay, so we'll go to Socrates, Kobe, then Ninetales.
So I have a direct challenge to you, Ninetales. So two questions. So one, what I'm hearing from you is that you're talking about a system that would be in place that would be transparent, presumably that would have like these lists based on something reasonable. Can you name me a system like this that exists just somewhere in America, a system that exists transparently like this on a broad scale? And also, if social media isn't analogous to like mass texting, to what we're talking about, then what's the situation in terms of looking at something that exists and how this might operate, because that's what we're talking about, some hypothetical thing based on things that we already see. What is something that's analogous then, if social media isn't? So those two challenges.
You can respond.
Okay, yeah, for the second one, there is nothing that I can directly think of, and I'm open to like hearing about them. And if we can find something analogous, maybe we can think of like more tailored solutions than just generalized ones. Can I get you to repeat the first thing again?
Sure.
Got scrambled in my brain.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So this question of like, so what you're describing doesn't sound that bad, right? So a very transparent system in which you would know, like, if you've been blocked, whatever, or why, like what your score is and exactly how that operates, all of that. That sounds not so bad. But I can't actually think of a system that exists that transparently like that kind of anywhere.
Transparently, no, but we have lists of exclusive access to things that are privileged to use everywhere. And so should a lot of those be transparent? Yes, they could be abused a lot less, and I'd love to see that. And I guess that kind of goes to Joe's point. Yeah, we want this to be transparent. We want people to know either you can or you can't post, and it's only these group of exclusive people who can use it. Sorry, not post, but spam text, because it's essential. Like they have to do it in order to do their jobs more effectively. Whereas like in the private sector, I think that they can just find other methods. In fact, they have like massive advertising agencies going towards them. But could they use more transparency so that way the exclusivity can't be abused? Sure, I totally agree.
Sure.
Well,
So just a really quick retort. So if that transparency, which is good, it's what we want, if that doesn't seem to have been achieved kind of anywhere, and we have lots of systems that have algorithms, that have lists, that do stuff like that, even if it's not analogous, and they're none of them are transparent, is it really reasonable to think that this will be built, even if it's like technically feasible?
So just real quick, just so we're on the same page in terms of policy right now, because I mean I'm noticing a pattern here where people don't know shit about policy and then they make ideas of things that don't fucking exist in reality. Like no, like we're talking about the revision and the amending of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, which I think for most people would argue that's something that would support. The reason why I talked about the two cases in question is because one of the problems with the TCPA on its face is that it limits the use of automatic dialing systems, artificial pre-recorded voice messages, SMS text messages, and fax machines. And also specified different requirements for fax machines, auto dialers, and voice messages systems. In the one case that I described earlier, which was Marks v. Crunch San Diego, it extended it to essentially include smartphones. So before, smartphones weren't necessarily included. Now they are. So the only one of the many reasons why we're seeing this influx, especially with things on smart devices, one, because of COVID, and two, because now smartphones are in the mix. Now this, and unfortunately, because of how smart devices are currently categorized. It leaves a lot of open windows in terms of abuses within smartphones specifically. That's why you'll be getting text messages and phone calls from your phone, and maybe not the same type of abuse on a landline. So something that I think we all would probably support is a much more broader look at what it means, the actual categorization of a smartphone. And then that way, maybe I would be more in support of this type of list. Because even if, again, not to cycle back on that, but the reason why I push back on the list so hard is because the inclusion of the list would be in direct contradiction to the TCPA. And that was the point I was trying to make.
Well, I would like
I want to go to Kobe, and then I want to move on soon from this topic to get to the.
I was asked a question.
I know, but like everyone's responding to you. Everyone is. So Kobe can say his piece, and then you can respond to both of them. But
yeah,
okay.
I'm not really going to be adding anything else on. So I think I'll be able to quickly put in. Also, I'm going to say is that I don't think that the overt dismissal of like slippery slopes is I think it's being a little used a little bit too flippantly here, right? Like I would not be very comfortable if I was a part of like the what is that group, the Not Fucking Around Coalition. I would not trust the government to put me on a list and platform my content. I'm not a fan of these type of content creators, but there's a tanky YouTuber called Bay Area something. I don't like him. He's like denies the Uyghur genocide, but like I think he should have the right to say that the CCP is good, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think that if you can demonstrate that there's a reason why the slope would be slippery, it's not necessarily a fallacy. So anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's not a slippery slope by definition at that point, right?
Nine tails.
Okay, fair enough.
So yeah, as far as like creating a transparent system goes, I realize that like with the way things currently are, it's probably not as feasible as it should be. But that's like when I say should be, it's because we're having an ought conversation, not an is conversation. That's why I pointed out to Joe that these are two different conversations. And I would love to have a discussion on what that policy should look like, even though I'm not much of a policy person. I'm more of like a ethics, politics kind of person when it comes down to it. And I leave that sort of thinking for the people who are better informed on that stuff. But I don't think like it's impossible. And unless someone can say why it is, that's great. But like if one law makes it impossible to do this thing, I'm okay with that contradiction, to be honest. And I'm sure we can find some way around it.
Well, something that could be a really easy policy prescription is revising the TCPA so the do not call list doesn't last for 5 years. One of the problems that you see is that you put on a do not call list and then you're just stuck on that do not call list. By law, they can only have to honor it for 5 years. That's essentially an election cycle. So then what happens is every 4 to 5 years, you're probably going to end up with the same sort of cycle feedback. I would argue a very simple thing and a very simple revision that you can get bipartisan support is the amendment within the TCPA to require solicitors to maintain, I'll make it as direct as possible, right? Require solicitors to maintain a company-specific do not call DNC list for consumers and make it so that it's honored indefinitely until the individual decides to be off of that list.
Okay, so we can move off of the topic or whatever, but at the same time, it's like we have to talk in hypotheticals. 2, we have to talk about things that are not necessarily perfectly analogous. And so I think by the time you're the frog in the boiling pot of water, it's already too late. You need to talk about problems as they arrive, and this is where the opaqueness, the inability to see the problems is part of the problem. So when we're talking about like social media, shadow bans, all that kind of stuff, we don't even understand the algorithms that are fucking us. That's part of the problem. So by the time that we get to the fucking problem, we don't even know how to deal with it. And I'm going to go ahead and shit talk Joe a little bit now because basically, Sarah, I don't know if you guys remember this shit. Obama made a certain kind of light bulb classification fucking illegal, and you had Republicans fight on the fucking Senate floor and the House floor for fucking for 3 months for like shitty old like inefficient asshole light bulbs. And they were like, this is destroying American jobs. So there's no fucking way that Republicans are not going to go to bat for fucking telemarketers, even if they're a bunch of fucking vampires. The telemarketers will donate fucking 10 grand to their campaign, and they'll fucking talk about how telemarketers are the backbone of the American economy and how we're destroying jobs.
They're middle America. right? I don't see why you commie assholes are disparaging
Can
the
I
good name of telemarketers.
They've been outsourced. We got to bring them back here.
Yeah.
We got to bring
I'd like
back.
to respond.
Yeah. So the last word, and then we're moving on.
Yeah, so as far as being the frog in the water, as everyone has pointed out, this is something that we haven't done before. And slippery slopes exist with all sorts of things that we already do today. The police, other forms of list, social media in general, that we're always the frog in the water. But this is why I'm saying that we absolutely limit how this can be abused by making it only essential.
Okay. So we'll move on to another topic. I didn't think I would get as much mileage out of this particular question as we ended up doing. That's why it was like a bonus topic and we kept pushing it off. I'm like, oh, there's no way we're going to get much out of this one. But I was very much wrong. All right. Like I said, people have strong opinions when it comes to like bias in tech, actually. All right. But
When it comes to my phone buzzing when I don't need it to, man,
Holy
holy
shit,
shit. Nothing pisses me off more.
Oh my God, it's crazy. It's crazy. And once again, Joe, well, I love having you on this panel because like I learned stuff from you. Because I'm thinking, yeah, that's right. I did put myself in a do not call list, and then an election cycle later, when I needed the most, it's failed me.
Fucking Bushes, am I right? The worst.
Oh
Another
my God.
HW Bush policy.
Yeah.
All the Bushes do is create bad policies.
Oh boy.
Listen, all I'm saying.
Wait. What's the
is you-
Patriot Act? Does that interact with the TCPA?
You haven't even given Jeb a chance yet. You're gonna say all of the policies are fucking
We
bad.
picked Trump, and we could have had Jeb. All right, we could have had Jeb.
Jeb exclamation point. Get it right. All right. So.
Yeah,
Jeb 2024.
Hold on.
Yeah.
We're talking about John. Listen, his name is John Ellis Bush. He's got to embrace that Southern in him, okay? Motherfucker sounds like a plantain owner. It's a plantain owner, not plantation, okay? Let's go.
All right. Topic 2. A town in Texas recently held municipal elections that were bitterly divided. The focus of the elections was whether to elect candidates that backed the racial diversity and sensitivity training program to be implemented in schools. This plan was prompted by a 2018 viral video of local white teenagers shouting the N-word. However, in the end, the conservatives won and the plan was defeated. Are you in favor of the proposed plan? Do you think that such a plan would have made a difference in a heavily Republican district? All right, we will start with my man, Go.
Yeah, I of course support the policy, and I believe that's something that all school systems should consider including within their code of conduct, among other proposals. If communities are looking to make dedicated efforts in tackling issues of racism socialized within their community, especially in this very white town, then it's obviously something that they ought to pursue and treat seriously in their public schools. And just as a cautionary tale, like, God, I feel like just fucking go to your board meetings. God damn it! Like, just for context, right? This may be like a little cautionary tale within local politics. $200,000 and 14% of the voter populace was able to landslide this election. Again, $200,000 of lobbying and 14% of the voter populace. What do you mean by voter populace, Joe? That was the turnout. Get fucked, Democrats.
Okay, thanks so much. Next, Layman.
I was muted. Sorry. So, as far as policies like this are concerned, I guess I'm kind of agnostic to whether or not it actually works. I remember like a while back, and this is a while back, so I probably need to look into it more. But I remember reading like a couple studies saying that racial sensitivity training was successful, but it was successful in like the short term, and then in the long term, it wasn't necessarily as successful. So that's something that I'm a little skeptical of. But right now, I'm actually like quickly Googling to see if there's like a broader consensus since I last looked at it to see if it is like successful in the long term. So if it is, like, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with addressing issues of racism. But I think that the optics surrounding the racial sensitivity stuff is like really fucking bad. Like it comes off as incredibly condescending to a lot of people and shit. And so advocating for that shit, if you're gonna do it, I think it's something that should stay maybe like within schools and stuff. I don't know. Like I'm a little wishy-washy on it, I gotta say. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay. So someone in chat, our good friend Reverie, ask a simple question as to like what plan I'm referring to. I'm gonna put the link in chat of the article that we're talking about, so everyone can see what this is all about. But thank you, Layman. We'll go to Connor, and everyone, please keep your introductions to like a minute long. That'd be great. Be solid. Thank you.
I'll try. So basically every fucking liberal and progressive and lefty needs a translator for conservative fucking people, okay? I recommend myself, Layman, or Drew Welty. We could help you out a lot. Stop calling it racial sensitivity training. Call it high intensity interval racial acquaintance training, brought to you by Dodge Ram and Monster Energy Drink. Okay, listen, like most white people in the Western world don't have a problem with being cool with their black or Hispanic neighbors. They don't have a problem with treating people equally. What they do have a problem with is basically saying like, hey honky, because you enslaved my ancestors fucking 400 years ago, and because your fucking grandpa was racist to my grandpa, you're a fucking piece of shit, and I'm gonna attack you individually for systemic issues. That's what most honkies have a problem with. So I'll leave it for the general fucking discussion. But the left, I think even every lefty in this room can agree with me that you have dog shit optics. You don't know how to talk to conservatives, and even something as simple as intersectionalism has been a fucking sore point in the national discourse. When I can like basically tell a conservative what fucking intersectionality is in 20 seconds and have them go, oh, uh-huh.
Okay. All right. Counterpoints for PR of the left. That'll be wonderful.
You're gonna hate it, but it's gonna work.
Oh boy. Anyway, Socrates, please.
All right, so I expected this to be kind of cringe, like sort of racial sensitivity training, whatever. But I actually skimmed the entire 34-page document, so you don't have to. And what I found was actually surprisingly uncringe. It's about so that the main thrusts of it are cultural competence, which is very distinct from like some sensitivity training, whatever. It's not about like oh, maybe you feel these ways, but it's literally like, let's learn some important key facts for teachers for understanding the backgrounds of students and how to teach them better. And it includes things like, let's have open conversations about potential racial tensions. So let's actually talk about issues that might be happening, and let's have some kind of like broader reporting of actual like racist incidents that happen within the school, that like in terms of reporting of like having these incidents noted and kept track of. There's a little bit of like, let's hire more diverse staff. That's the most kind of like divisive thing that's within there. But yeah, this was overall like so much less cringe than I could ever. This is probably the least cringe ever, this kind of like thing that I've seen anywhere. It was like worded really, really well.
Okay.
So I'm for it.
Fair enough. Kevin Castley.
Yeah, thanks. So as far as most of the content of that goes, I'm in support of it. I think the idea that you're going to get triggered by, the idea of learning about other cultures and everything is pretty goofy. And ultimately, would raise the question of, do you have some sort of, like racial bias or something? Now, in general, though, I think the hiring quotas, that sort of stuff, yeah, that's where it can get problematic. I do think, though, that the idea that, well, would it work in a very Republican area or anything? I mean, it basically would be to imply that, well, because it's a Republican area, it'll tend to skew, I guess, in a more, less inclusive direction. But the problem that I would have would be, at least with that phrasing, is that it would ignore cases of, Democratic or in general progressive condescension. You could look at this with the phrase low information voters when white Bernie bro, Berkeley progressives were upset that a lot of black voters didn't vote for Bernie in the primaries. They vote for Biden, for example. And so it kind of, it implies that there's no sort of racial biases or anything on the left side. But I would say, obviously, depends on the voter turnout. It depends, that's something that Joe's actually right about. Like if you're somebody who wants it to pass, you need to get more voters to turn out to that. But I wouldn't say that something is illegitimate or anything, or I wouldn't say that a loss is illegitimate. For example, if there's a very low voter turnout, it just means that not very many people particularly care to bother to vote. So, and you have the right to do that, and I think you should have the right to do that. So in general, yeah, there's some things that you could probably tweak there, but I don't have any sort of issue with people, having, in this case, what was it, cultural competence as part of their, their job training. I mean, why wouldn't it be part of their job training? So, yeah, if you have a diverse population.
We have a minute, but thank you, Kevin. You're definitely valued here. Let's go to Ninetales.
Okay, so first and foremost, there is mixed data on whether or not this sort of training is effective, but I wasn't able to find a lot of longitudinal studies that cover multiple studies, large sample sizes or over time. But I was able to find some meta-analyses and review the literature, and it seems that the reason for these mixed results is not so much because there are mixed results, because we don't have enough specific studies in the field where we need them, and these studies in the field don't actually evaluate like the end result as well, as they just usually ask somebody something right afterwards and then take that for granted that they've changed. What we have seen is generally that people who did have some sort of prejudice before no longer have them. But what I particularly like about it is that people can no longer operate on plausible deniability that, oh, I didn't know that this was sexual harassment. Oh, I didn't know that this would make people with darker skin feel uncomfortable. Now they do. And now they can no longer operate on like this not knowing excuse that so many people, I'm sure, try to use. As far as like as far as it for politicians, outreach is huge. We've lots of studies have been done to show that like when a party when they can identify with a party, it works better. So if they can get the racial sensitivity training right, then I think that would make a huge impact on their outreach program, because minority groups would feel more included. And as far as like large Republican areas, yes, I know, Prime, I'm so sorry. As far as large Republican areas, I don't expect it to work very well, but these places might become less solidly blue if we actually make a more inclusive program for minorities.
Kobe.
Okay, hold on one second.
Kobe,
Okay.
your mic is.
Wait, am I good? Okay. Yeah. So, obviously, I agree. This stuff is good. I've also looked into it a little bit, and I'm less than convinced that it does work. I should say, I'm less than convinced that it has the outcomes that people expect it to have. I should say, right. I think it does have effects. I think it does kind of have positive effects. I'm not necessarily against this stuff, and I think in the case that we're talking about, this is good. But I think a lot of people have the idea that it's going to have kind of the idea of like a shock therapy kind of effect, where you can just like take a racist workplace and put this in, and it clears out. It's like putting a pool cleaner in a pool, kills all the bacteria. I don't necessarily think that works. I'm trying to find. I really wish I need to just write this down. There's a very good study called it's called the Birmingham Girls Study, that studied a bunch of girls that moved from a conservative town into a liberal college, and they found that actually the biggest influence on their opinions was just being in a social setting in which liberal values were just accepted, in which were seen as normal, in which their professors, their friends, their fraternities, etc. I don't really think it was like they couldn't actually even correlate it to like the classes they took, right? Like, so people that take like political science, agriculture, etc. It was the fact that they were around liberal, they're in a liberal community, and that was their friends, that was the peer group. And they found that actually 25 years later, that the liberal trends actually stayed with the girls. The girls, or the women, as they became women, they kept their liberal trend. So that's what I would probably advocate for. I would actually, maybe we could actually have a conversation with this about affirmative action. It sounded like there was some pushback on that. I actually think affirmative action is pretty pog. There's some pretty cool stuff there. I think that one of the reasons is that you can have, again, if you're in an environment in which, as was pointed out by somebody, I forgot who, if you're in an environment in which like I'm taking forever, in which in which multiculturalism is seen as normal, and then respecting other cultures is seen as like the default, it is just going to be more awkward to be racist, and it's going to be more uncomfortable. So I think that's a good thing. I do, though, am a little bit the last thing is I am a little bit suspicious on the idea of like the plausible deniability. I think it's kind of similar to like bosses firing people. It is so, like for like disability, right? Like you can't fire somebody for being disabled, but you can find a bajillion side reasons to fire them. I think it'd be like a similar thing. Like it's very easy for racists. I'm not sure if like the plausible deniability would be good there. I think people can always
fire
find
you anyway, yeah.
Yeah, or they'll fire, or just discrimination. You can find a million reasons to say that you don't happen to like the ex black person, and you can't tell. You know what I mean? But anyways, so that's it. Sorry for taking forever.
No, fine. Killer.
For me, I break this down to two different issues and seeing if this actually accommodates those. The first one is whether or not kids actually know if what they're doing is wrong or not, which I think that this training could achieve if you actually think that is the problem. But the second one is, does it actually stop them from doing a shitty act, even though they know it's societally unacceptable? You can give them a training that tells them what's societally unacceptable, but if they choose to partake in that or to be unacceptable, then that training doesn't necessarily stop. Not even necessarily. That training just doesn't stop that. And I work with teens. I do a lot of stuff with education. I teach robotics to them and stuff like that. And sometimes teens just like to be edgy and contrarian and just fight against society, and they'll just say a slur because they can. And you have to deal with that shit all the time in high school. And to me, in the end of the day, I don't know if this would actually ever stop that. You might be able to teach them. For me, I'm very skeptical if this would actually reduce training. I do agree with what Kobe said on societal pressures and how those can manipulate. I say that in a bad way, but manipulate how people, not in a bad way, in a good way, how people think or act within that society, especially as you get older. You can't handle those pressures if society kicks you out.
Okay, open to the panel. Kobe, Ninetales.
So, so there's like this. I'm sure people have probably seen it before. The brown eyes, blue eyes experience. I'm sure people have say this when we watch this in school. Yeah, famous. So, for those of you who don't know, it's like a very, very it's like the atypical anti-racist bind training, right? What they do is they separate a room into eye colors, so brown eyes or whatever on one side, and then they discriminate against one of the groups, right? And they typically will do it so there's like most of the black kids are on, or like non-white kids are on one side and the white kids on the other. And it is like very famous for making like tons of very, very explosive reactions. People have like big problems, right? I really recommend you look into it. I believe it was an MIT study that did a big thing where they like recommended a bunch of different methods, and they like specifically said that they couldn't find enough evidence to recommend her method. I think that the kind of the shock therapy method just doesn't work. Trying to like shame people into not being racist, I just don't work. I think the opposite does, which is you do like multicultural training, you do these kind of like these like inclusivity trainings, and then you do what I call like positive peer pressure, right? Where it just becomes like obviously overt racism has to be. I'm not talking about overt racism, but more like subvert racism or like these more like unaddressed biases. I think that like changing the community and trying to positively peer pressure people is much more effective than anything that's like the kind of like in your face kind of stuff.
Yeah, so like basically people acclimate to the environment that you put them in.
Let's go to Ninetales, then Connor.
Yeah, another feature of cracking down on like normative racism is that it like when you have a society with normative racism, I'm just going to call it racism just to be very general, but it can mean prejudice, bias, whatever, is that it demonstrates to the minority groups that they're less wanted than the people who can use that normatively, much like I'm sure the vice versa is true. White people feel uncomfortable when racism about them is said by minority groups. So I feel like this is one of those things where, like, if we all just treat each other with common courtesy, aka no one wants to be discriminated against for their ethnic background or skin color, then we'd all be better off. I know that's like a really dumb thing to say. As far as eliminating all racism goes, this definitely is not going to eliminate all racism. It's definitely not effective enough nor potent enough to do that. Even if it were completely ineffective of changing people's minds, I still like it for the premise that people can no longer use the excuse that they didn't know any better. I think that that is a valuable enough reason to not give people who do that sort of thing an out, so that way they can do it and just come up with an excuse.
I don't think they would
So-
have an out though, because
Yeah, I
like,
just said
it's
what
like
it is.
it's like what Kobe said earlier, right? Like your boss is gonna fucking fire you anyway. Like and you know, in regards to like this sort of training, I linked a study in the chat.
Okay.
This is like, I think this is the one that I was reading that I was alluding to earlier that made me a little more skeptical of it. It's from 2018. It was published by Harvard. The authors are Frank Dobbin and Alexandra Kalav. And the findings from it basically it sampled like 31 organizational studies, 985 studies of anti-bias interventions. And the findings, they said that there's like ample evidence that like the training alone doesn't change attitudes. There haven't been a lot of longitudinal studies, as I think it was Nine Tails that said this before.
Yeah, there are.
And the long-term effects are kind of mixed. So like 2 of the studies they looked at in the meta-analysis showed that there were positive effects, that longitudinally it did help with, you know, people's racial biases, 2 negative, and then 1 with no effect. So like, I don't know, again, like, it seems really amorphous to me as to whether or not this training is just worth the resource expenditure. Maybe because the findings are inconclusive, that there might be an argument to make, like, locally they work in certain environments. So I'm open to that, but yeah. I
So as
just...
far as them not getting fired, then the boss, like if we're talking about the owner of the company, sure, then there's a much bigger problem there that needs to be dealt with than what training could ever deal with. But if we're talking about like a boss who's technically on a lower chain of command, then they no longer have the excuse to not fire their employee because they assume that they didn't know better. And this is all I'm saying, is that this creates a degree of accountability that people can't just weasel their way out of.
So let's go to Lord Connor, Socrates, and then Joe. But to Layman quickly about those studies, did they just measure were the attitudes change or actual behaviors change? Because you can still have certain attitudes about people.
Yeah,
but
I was like quickly Googling shit. I think I found like one study where they did like categorically differentiate them, and there was one study that found that the behaviors did not change, but people's like perceived sort of, what's the word? Their minds changed. That's the only way I know how to word it, I guess. Okay. Does that make sense? Like,
maybe, sure.
Awareness.
Okay.
One of the reasons why I valued that MIT study was because it was specifically in the context of like a business school trying to find the effective to actually eliminate just like the negatives of bias. So it was specifically trying to look for like hiring bias, these kind of things. So I feel like it was that was a little more active. It was like looking for active like bigotry.
Let's go to Connor, Socrates, Joe.
Yeah, so maybe before I pull a pin and throw a grenade in the room, I kind of want to just talk a little bit about my background. So basically, like, I'm a military veteran. I've moved every 3 years for the past, I don't know, 2 decades. I've lived in Europe. I was stationed in Japan. Basically, I just want you to know that this isn't coming from, I saw somebody with a different melanin content than me, and I was like, that's weird and bad. So I'm gonna, hate that person arbitrarily, okay? I think where conservatives get uncomfortable and where this conversation could be productive is, I think there's a difference between like race, so melanin content, ethnic background, national origin, all that kind of stuff, and culture and behavior. I think there's an actual articulable difference between these things, and what honkies such as myself, crackers, if you will, what we get uncomfortable with is where if you say, okay, do not judge somebody by their melanin content. Okay, cool, sweet. I don't want to judge anybody and be a fucking asshole. Don't judge anybody by their national origin. Okay, sweet. I don't want to judge them by their fucking national origin. Like, I come from a weird spot. I don't want people to judge me arbitrarily. So this is all good. This is all well reciprocated. What feels scary and very slippery slopey, so Nine Tails can take me to task for this. What feels scary is when we're told that certain cultural traditions or cultural things are things that we can't talk about because of people's different origins, and some of these things are toxic, negative, shitty. We don't want them in our society.
Yep.
And basically we can't even have the conversation about negative attribution to minority cultures because it's instantaneously going to be wrapped up into, well, you just hate them because of their melanin, you just hate them because of their nationality, you just hate them because they come from someplace that you don't, you hate them because they speak English with a funny accent, all that kind of shit. And a little bit more about my background. I was in the military and I was in law enforcement. I'm almost done, Nine Tails, I promise. And basically, I'm telling you, there's some real fucked up shit that's out there that nobody wants, but it's acceptable in certain groups. So I'll leave it there.
Let's go to Socrates, Joe Lewis.
Yeah, so just to recenter the conversation back on the specific topic, which is this school or this school district. I think it's this specific school, maybe school district, and this specific set of trainings and of things that they want funding to do. I think it's somewhere within the range of $200,000 to $400,000 total for all of this. So just first, like, why are they even like looking at this? They say like problem / opportunity. Why are they looking at this? Well, from the span of about like 9 years, so from about 2008, jumping to 2017, this school district, the demographics of the students massively shifted. So it went from 88% white to like 66% white. So going from 4% to like 16% Asian, from like 4% to like 10% Hispanic, and from like very, very low to like 4% Native American. So there's a large demographic shift. The student population maybe represents the community that shifted, but the teachers that are there, the educators, probably didn't shift within that period of time to match the demographics. And specifically in terms of the training, so they as far as I skimmed really carefully the entire 34 pages, I didn't see anything about racial sensitivity. Racial bias never came up. That was never a training that was intended, right? Cultural competency. So one example of this would be like the difference between like Asian parents and white parents. It can be really, really large. When you look at how you get parents involved in their children's like extracurriculars or getting them to do homework or anything, there's literally like, this is something that we need to move away from thinking of any kind of judgmental. Like, it's not about like, oh, there's something wrong with you, you're biased. It's like, you don't say like, oh, there's something wrong with you, you're biased against algebra, you're not good at algebra. It's literally like, let's teach you some information. Let's give you some knowledge about something. Literally just neutral, here's some information that you can use to be better informed about how to help these students. So that's the kind of direction that it seemed like, based on the verbiage, based on this seemed like where that was headed. Cultural competence.
Okay, Joe, and then Nine Toes.
Yeah, that's pretty much the nail on the head. Another stat that you're missing there, Socrates, is that the black population of student body dropped from 2.8 to 2 across that same span. And the only reason why they got here in the first place, just so we're very clear on this, which is why I'm hiding my power love on this topic, is that the conversation around this and how it got here was a school bus full of white kids saying the N-word. And then when they were investigating the very situation, it happened again in the exact same school district. So they had a very special effort to make sure that this thing was addressed. And we're not talking like a couple of years apart from it. Like oh, this was back in the 08, and that's no, this is like less than 3 years apart from each other. And my frustration is always that whenever we have these conversations about what we should do to improve cultural competency, and the understanding that race is not inherently disconnected from ethnicity within the United States, and it's also part cultural, part behavioral, part social, is that there's a very loud populace of Americans who don't want to have these conversations and don't want to try to improve their competency. And as a Black American, and my girlfriend can attest to this too, we have these conversations within our family all the time. This isn't something that is a passive conversation. And for white Americans, because of how society is structured, whether that be if you're in Canada or the United States or in Europe, is that you, as a white individual from these areas, you don't have to have these conversations. You can live your whole life not having to have these conversations. But then what happens, and we see this in front over this past summer, is that when these issues all collide with each other, whether that be policing in the United States and the interaction with racial and ethnic minorities, or when you have the incidences in schools of white Americans saying and doing disgusting things within their school system in regards to race, in regards to cultural behavior, in regards to social behavior, it gets sort of thrown behind the rug and like, oh, you know, they're young, they knew better. Like, look, like you gotta stop doing this like, oh, they're young, they know better thing. And this is like the same reason why I was frustrated with SDL, is that somewhere in your socialization, you allowed this shit, whether it be from your parents or your social circle, to just linger inside of your brain. And then what happens is you get reminders that this is part of your thoughts, your thinking, and your navigation. So while it might sound weird, or like, oh, why, like why are they don't know any better of saying the N word? Yes, they do. These are illegals, you know. Oh, they're so young, they don't know what it means to be illegal. Yes, they do. They hear it from their parents, they hear it from the people around them, and then it ends up in their rhetoric and the way that they talk and think about the world, and then it collides with the school system. And we're lucky, right? Like, very often what you'll see in practice is that school systems won't do anything about this behavior and think that they can handle these on an individual basis, when in reality it's not necessarily the case. What tends to happen is that they'll maybe discipline the student in the way that's within their code of conduct, but then nothing really happens from that, and I think that's unacceptable. There should be additional education about cultural competency within the United States. And it seems to be very often that conservatives, when I consider this, and I'm saying conservatives very directly, because we got to really identify who the enemy is when we're talking about this policy change, is that they think that it's some Marxist ideology or far left ideology. Cultural competency is not ideological. It is the bare minimum that Americans have to do in order to navigate in society. And there's certain cultural sensitivities that have race in it, because if we understand that America is a country where race is not a side dish, it's a part of the casserole, then we have to have these conversations in a way that's serious. And unfortunately, within this school district, a majority white school district, a majority white town that was Trump country, that's shown that they don't care. And it's unfortunate.
Let's go to Nine Tails, then Socrates and Connor.
Killer was had his hand up before.
Oh, I didn't see that. I'm sorry. Well, we'll go to Nine Tails, then Killer, then Socrates and Connor.
Okay, yeah. So I got a couple things down on my list. Oh, okay. So yeah, as far as what culture is, Connor was saying, I'm that your examples of being in the military and police had nothing to do with what you're talking about with culture, and so I found that to be a really interesting.
I promise you, they do.
It was a really interesting bait and switch. Culture is still something you can be prejudiced against, believe it or not. And your culture isn't so great, believe it or not. So I think a lot of the prejudice people have about culture is rooted in American exceptionalism. And if American exceptionalism wasn't taught to the youths, then people wouldn't encounter new cultures and have to treat it like it's this alien thing, because you would have already entertained the idea that there are other cultures than yours. Yeah, and thanks, Joe, for everything you said there. That was wonderful.
Don't talk shit about honky culture.
Yeah, what the fuck?
We'll go to
this was direct. It's direct.
See, you're gonna have a chance.
I don't know. I think
we'll have
she went in pretty hard.
Killer, Socrates, counter, and then Kevin. But okay, go ahead, Killer.
Well, now I'm like hooked on Nine Tails, even though I was going to ask Joe his thing. I'm going to ask his thing really fast, just as like a side note. But my biggest concern when you do these bias training programs, especially for things in schools, is I've seen this directly where you teach the student you try to teach the student or show them the best way to go about things, and then their parents almost deprogram them. I don't know how else to say it besides that, where, you know, if they have a shitty racist parent, and you try to teach them not to be shitty, racist little things, then they go back home and the parent just deprograms everything and wipes the slate again. You know, and you're just permanently bashing your head in against a wall. For Ninetales, my only thing with what what you said towards Connor that I find interesting is I think cultures are a mixed bag of mixed bag of goods. There are aspects to my culture that are both shitty, or especially shittier than other cultures, and then there's aspects of my culture that I think can be not inherently that wow, that sounds really wrong, that can be better in some regards than other cultures. I don't
do
think
agree.
that, and I really don't like the whole concept that's all just pure American exceptionalism. There are aspects to it that you see this a lot with how things like what I love about the Mexican culture, people from Mexico, is how family oriented they are. And I wish that people in my culture, from my family, was more like that. But at the same time, I see things like independence problems and stuff like that. A quick example I'm throwing out there and giving up my time or the rest of it. If there is time, whatever.
Socrates counter. Kevin, and I'm not sure if you had your hand up. Kobe. Oh, you did have a hand. Okay, and then we'll put Ninetales at the end. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had there's something that Joe reminded me of what I wanted to respond to Connor with regard to this fear about kind of shutting down conversation. This like new school policy thing, one of the goals of it is to create open dialogues between the students and each other, and the students and the faculty, which obviously could be implemented in a way that ranges from anything from cringe lib shit to hyper based Socratic dialogue, right? Hopefully that would be implemented well. But I think that the goal, in terms of, again, just to recenter this on the specific school district, their specific plans, that was their goal, is as one of the points, is to create that dialogue. And just to Ninetales, I feel like you maybe misread some of the things that Connor Points was saying. It sounded like he was pretty self-critical of some things within like honky or cracker culture, not being the best.
Yeah.
And kind of being open to a lot of different things.
So I appreciate that.
No, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Jeez, you're gonna interrupt me on my own turn? That's savage. Fucking white oppression is real. So anyway, all right. So somebody brought up white people or conservatives. They didn't even say white. They said conservatives. Conservatives don't want to have these conversations. I agree with you. And the reason why is because basically of the childhood education that I received. So to just give you an idea of the school or the cartoon and educational program that I came up with, it was Magic School Bus, Power Rangers, Barney the Dinosaur, and basically, literally, the Yellow Ranger was Asian, the Black Ranger was black. I'm trying to think of like other examples, but it was so fucking on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a part of liberal propaganda of the 90s, because what we were trying to do is the population is undergoing a dramatic demographic shift. Okay, America was 85% white up until like 1965. We've dropped down to 60% now, and I think by 2050 we'll be down to 49%. This is a dramatic demographic shift. And generationally, the 1990s education for young people was basically everybody else is just like you. Well, that's not true, right? People are a little bit different. They have cultural quirks, ethnic backgrounds. They have. I don't know why you're fucking nodding your heels, Ninetales. Like, people aren't
it wasn't
different.
like
That's
that.
weird.
No,
Are we
nobody
talking
ever
about
was
the
taught that
actual
all our
culture, or are
cultures
we
are the
talking
same. No,
about?
nobody was ever taught that our cultures were the same. We were taught that we're invariant as like a species, but but nobody was ever taught that our cultures don't change.
Okay, well, okay, so subconsciously through pop media, that is what I was taught. Because these characters didn't have any character virtues. They had no story, no background. The only thing that they shared in common was the fact that they wanted to get on the Magic School Bus because Miss Frizzle was trying to fucking kill them. Or in the Power Rangers, they wanted to turn into a giant fucking robot so they could fight fucking kaiju, okay? They had no history, no traits, no background, no personality. It was literally just Asian girls can also fight kaiju. That was the moral message of Power Rangers, okay?
The melting pot.
Yeah. So the reason why honkies such as myself have difficulty being dragged into the modern conversation surrounding race and culture is because it is actually antithetical to the moral system that we were taught as kids. The moral system we were taught as kids is everybody is the same. Don't look at race. Don't see race. Prime is just, he's my brother from another mother, and we both love anime, even though I don't. Basically, like, I shouldn't even consider systemic issues, his background, his family, his culture, anything like that, because we're just the same. And that's what I'm saying is, like, this is part of the fucking conversation. Sorry, I'm triggering you, Ninetails, but this is why I was happy to hear cultural competence, in which in the school system, it was actually being acknowledged that there is a difference between the way cracker ass honky parents teach or raise their kids and Asian parents raise their kids, because that acknowledgement would not have happened in 1996.
I also really want to add something really quick, just to that, and it's more so a compliment to Joe. So Joe, I actually like that framing of that. I think that you would sell that to a lot more people who are more apprehensive about racial conversations, selling it to them as like, what was the wording again? It just escaped me. Cultural what? Cultural
competence.
Cultural
Yeah,
competence.
That's what Socrates brought up within the document. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's such a great way to phrase that, because intuitively, right, it takes out the white people part of it. And then all the white dudes who need to learn some shit, right? They hear that and they're like, "Oh shit, nobody's attacking me for being white. Now I don't have to complain about this shit constantly." So it's actually a really great way to frame it. That's all I want to say.
Can I give a very brief, a very like 30-second example?
Can you do it
before my
actually
question?
30
5
seconds?
seconds.
Holy shit, please.
5 seconds.
Sorry.
I really want Joe to give
Get
the
the
example.
sponsorship from Monster Energy, and you're fucking home free. All right, just work on the sponsorship.
Okay, Joe, you go 30 seconds. Now I want to go to Kevin.
I just want to. Yeah, I just want to bring it up because like my girlfriend's here to fact check me. So basically, namaz is prayer, right? And if you're Shia or Sunni, there's requirements, right? It's either 3 and I think 5, and they're done as what's that? Yeah, you're Muslim. And the problem here is that one of my students has an afternoon prayer that's just in his schedule, and him and I understand that is something that he must do, and there's a space specifically for him with that within the school system. The problem is that what happens is you hear all these like students say, well, why does he get to lead before like we do? Because it lines up between like a bell transition. And I like the people who know, they go like, just no, like shut the fuck up. Like this isn't something that you can challenge, because what happens is some kids would literally challenge him, like, you can't lead, the bell's not wrong. And that's like that creates an anxiety and otherism within an individual when that happens, because it's like, yeah, this is like part of my very being. I can't just cater to the masses in the school setting, and thankfully my school is good about that.
Everything when teachers say, "Oh, your name's difficult."
Yeah.
Even something as small as that.
Yeah,
Excuse you?
and I think like within cultural competency, that's something that we ought to do. Like understand the differences within cultures, and unfortunately, is it tied with race? Absolutely, but that's something we should definitely observe.
So we'll move on. Oh man, I'm trying not to be triggered here, but Kevin will be next. I just wanted to quickly respond to counterpoints. Sorry, you're wrong. You're wrong. Power Rangers was created by a man named the version that we got here by Han Saban. And Saban is like nobody's liberal, right? He is extremely conservative, huge Trump supporter, and kind of racist.
Hold on.
Racist.
Okay. Can I make the most insane connection of all time? Okay.
Okay, make
that guy, Hayam Saban.
Hayam Saban.
1980s. There's a businessman in Iraq named Ahmed Shalabi. He gets kicked out of Iraq. He goes to Lebanon. He starts doing some business deals. He gets in trouble. He gets bankrupt. That Hayam Saban bails him out of money, gives him money so he gets out of thing, because there's something. Many years later, Ahmed Shalabi is the source that the Pentagon and the CIA use to invade Iraq.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I remember this.
Okay.
I do remember this. I remember that.
Oh my
I
God.
remember that. That's the
Kobe,
thing.
you need to fuck off.
That's the
okay?
thing that
Star
happened.
Trek and Obama.
No,
Can I please
remember
directly
this.
respond
This
to
is absolutely,
Connor?
hold on. No. So we're gonna Kevin, Kobe, Ninetales, Joe.
Okay, yeah. So thanks, Prime. I just wanted to touch on something or a characterization that Ninetales had brought up earlier in response to Counterpoint's assertions, dismissing it basically as American exceptionalism, and not just to Counterpoints, but to this general sort of, I guess, honkiness or something, whatever term we're using. I just wanted to say about that. Look, I've got a video on this that America is not exceptional. America's meta exceptional. What do I mean by that? We got dozens of exceptional countries out there. Taiwan is exceptional. South Korea is exceptional. Australia is exceptional. The UK is exceptional in the grand scheme of things. Yet all these countries would be Soviet colonies or Nazi colonies without the United States of America. And so America's meta exceptional because all exceptional countries owe their existence and security to the United States of America. And so, what is America? America is not a nation state. A nation state, like say Japan or North Korea, for example, is one where there's this idea that the race and the state are like they're seen as there's a race that's given chauvinistic priority, right? And North Korea is a great example of that. The idea of the cleanest race, and that the Korean Workers' Party champions the Korean people and everybody else is inferior, that kind of thing. America is not a nation state. America is a state in which all people are equal. And the idea of America is that all people, regardless of background, regardless of race, etc., can have freedom, prosperity, liberty, etc., and the opportunity to thrive. And yes, also the opportunity to fail, right? And that idea of basically characterizing American exceptionalism as some degree of racial chauvinism misses the fact that the United States of America has oftentimes been the greatest force against racialized chauvinistic nation states, from the Imperial Japanese Empire, of course, to looking at, Ba'athist Iraq, which hated the Kurds, gassed the Kurds, etc. I mean, it misses the fact that the United States has done more than any other country in terms of actual liberation. I mean, we can look at just in this century so far. The United States in 2001 and 2003 set out to liberate 50 million people from Islamofascist tyranny and succeeded in doing so. And now now Kurds and Sunni Iraqis and Shiite Iraqis all have a chance at actual, harmony and peace instead of one gassing the other. So.
Oh man. Oh god. Kevin. There's so much to respond there. Oh my god. Ah. Okay. Oh buddy, you're good. You are good at throwing bombs at people. So it was
literally and in the conversation.
It was Kobe. If you still has something to say.
Yeah.
No disrespect. No disrespect.
Kobe, if you have something else to say, then Nine Tails and Joe.
Yes. Okay. This is all that I want to say when it comes to this kind of like cultural supremacy, blah, blah, blah stuff. The great Thomas Huxley, who was a great biologist, great champion of evolution, he once said that my business is to teach my aspirations to conform themselves to fact, not to try and make facts harmonize with my aspirations. It really does. I think that like I'm not trying to do like a Sam Harris scientism thing where we can like draw it's from Oz kind of thing. Or sorry,
I will fucking fight.
Yeah, no, it does seem that I think that just like the way that human beings seem to work is that like we kind of have like a preference to the things that we are comfortable with and a little bit of a apprehension to things that we're not. And it seems like there's some people are a little bit less, some people are more. There are obviously some cultures are a little bit more open, a little bit more closed, but that just kind of seems to be like it's like a gradient, right? And I think that we should just try to figure out ways to hem and haw, is the right way to say it? Sand down the rough edges of that, try to make the bad things go, the bad parts that go away. I think that I think that there's nothing wrong with teaching this kind of stuff, and I think that it's good. So that's all.
Nine Tails and Joe.
Oh wow, Power Rangers, eh? Okay, so gonna quickly respond to the deprogramming and parents deprogramming their kids thing. That's gonna happen, I agree, but at the same time, we still need to do what we can to eliminate whatever bias and prejudice and stuff exists in society. As far as it not just being American exceptionalism, you can make that case, but I would argue it actually is, even if those other things still apply, because what you're doing when you do that is missing the forest for the trees. All like Connor's example, especially embodied American exceptionalism. Like, oh, media doesn't show other cultures and races as they really are. Yeah, because all Americans know are themselves. That's all they write is about American culture, and maybe that's like somewhat common elsewhere. But I'd say it's probably more pervasive in countries that have some sort of self-serving masturbatory nationalism going on. Why do I have cultural vacuousness written down? But yeah, like
That's a
lot of
liberalism.
people a lot of people just seem to be like responding to a vacuous culture that's like somehow worse than yours, but at the same time, um, like I've never actually heard of culture. Like I've heard of like religious differences. I've heard of land disputes and stuff like that that maybe carry over into places like America. But I've never actually heard of something that's just purely culture. You know, not bigotry, not anything else. Just purely a culture that actually conflicts with another culture. I think
Okay,
that's
so
I think that's a lot rarer than what we
I have
make it
a,
out to
I,
be.
Fuck
I,
Bob.
I have a
I
question.
think that's a lot more rare than we make it out to be.
I think Connor
and,
should
And if
respond.
anything, this makes the case that Americans need to assimilate.
Directly at Connor, so
Okay.
you should probably.
Holy
Please don't do that,
fuck.
Layman. Don't.
Sorry.
Don't do that.
Oh, sorry.
No, if I could, I'm
Okay.
literally just gonna Google fucking culture, because you basically listed like 5 different things that go into culture, and then you said I see these things spilling over into different societies and causing conflicts, but I don't see culture causing the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. The customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. So I would say customs, arts, social institutions would be all of the fucking traits that you just listed. So I have no fucking idea how you can divorce the word culture from the fucking traits that you just listed, because literally you said I have no idea how culture in like there's cultural conflicts, and then you listed 3 subcomponents of culture that come into conflict. So let's talk
Culture's
about
fun.
customs. So let's talk about customs. I'm talking. I can't hear you. So let's talk about culture. I have a friend who's from Egypt, a very close friend, and she came to America as a first-generation Egyptian American, and she had premarital sex. Her family wanted to ship her back to Egypt, repair her hymen, and marry her to a 40-year-old, because that would be more responsible than letting her participate in our degenerate culture. I view that as pretty fucked up.
So
Hold on, I'm not
do you
done.
think-
I'm not done.
Yeah, you're
Hold
never
on.
done.
I'm not even close to done. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like, remember,
that's
you're
because, all right,
responding
yo,
to
you
me,
also
and you
said
started with the straw man.
yeah.
You can't even get my own
Okay.
points right.
I mean, you
Okay,
did
yeah,
it too.
go ahead.
so,
Killing it,
Go
counterpoint.
ahead. Go
You're
ahead.
killing
List
it,
your point
counterpoint.
again, so I don't straw man it.
Yeah,
Go ahead. List your point again, so I don't straw man it.
My point was pretty simple, that like the fact that you don't see other cultures in your media is American exceptionalism. How about addressing that one instead?
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you just said. So say it one more time, and I'll try to address
The
it.
fact that you don't see other cultures represented in your media is American exceptionalism. You tried using that as an example to debunk my claims that American exceptionalism drives these things. I'd like you to acknowledge or concede.
I don't think
that
I've
point.
ever made that point. I don't think I've ever made that point. And then let's
Then it must have been
go
somebody
down.
else.
So okay, so let's deal with what you said instead of something that I can invent. Okay, so no, I would actually concede that media up until the 1990s was white dominated. Also, there were some things that we had problems with. For instance, colorism, something that we haven't even addressed yet. It's societally, because you know who was the acceptable black man for America in the 1990s? Will Smith. Okay, that the guy who didn't cuss in hip hop, and the guy who basically was like an action movie star for half a decade after being a goober comedian. That was who was an acceptable black person in American culture. So no, I'm not going to pretend America's perfect, and I would be perfectly okay not defending, but owning all of the fucked up shit that we've done for the past 4 centuries. However, I would be my caveat to this, and then I'll shut up because I can talk for 20 minutes at a time. My caveat to that is I do not know who does this better. I don't know who has more ethnic groups. I don't know who has more linguistic groups. I don't know who incorporates people into a liberal framework. I don't know anybody who actually takes the melting pot or the gumbo philosophy and does it better than us. Kobe, I would love to hear your fucking response if anybody.
Canada.
That's because America
Canada.
is exceptional. That's because America is exceptional.
No, Canada doesn't. Honestly, Canada simply
That
doesn't.
is
rate anything.
empirically true.
Okay, so
Canada's better at it. But but Connor,
Should I
I'm
Google
sorry.
the demography of Canada right now?
I
Stop
thought you
it.
ended
Connor.
this with a culture of the gaps argument, and then you ended it with like an inclusion of the gaps argument.
Connor, I was kind of memeing a little bit, by the way.
So-
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just sorry. The logic of
But
it
it
is
is kind of true. It's
Kobe,
like,
please explain your fucking idea.
Oh yeah. So all I would say, just like in one factor, I think that Canada does a much better job integrating their Indigenous First Nations into their kind of like general like cultural consciousness. I think that we do a really important job of that. Just one example.
Sure. Okay. Fair. But Connor's point is still. I was pointing to Joe for some reason. Connor's point is still valid. That Connor's point still holds validity, though. That like America does, unlike many other cultures, provide that opportunity to do so. It doesn't mean it's the only culture, but that it's a significant one on the world stage, basically.
Okay. Kobe, you quickly respond, and Socrates and
Yes.
then Joe.
Yeah, sure. So just to talk about just very, very quickly about the idea of like different like cultural values, I actually think this is actually relatively common. I think a good example of this would be like different interpretations of like what democracy means. I have a really cool paper here that I can link in chat if people would like it. It's called The Populist Stream of China. It's talking about how democracy is viewed in China. This was during the Tiananmen Square. A reporter asked one of the students that was protesting, and the student asked, "So what does democracy really mean to you?" The reporter stammered, "Well, I guess elections." The student said, "I think more in terms of Rousseau and direct models of direct participation." In some countries, democracy more doesn't really mean necessarily voting for people or whether or not the people that I'm voting for are decided by my community. It's more how much actual participation do I have in my society, in my community. Some societies prefer more like a base low community participation and not worrying about having federal representation. I think that this idea that like cultures there aren't real cultural differences is just ridiculous. I mean, some countries, for example, look at Iran and America when it comes to how they integrate their churches. Iran has a state church that literally runs parts of the government. America has a history of flawed but separation of church and state. Look at France and America. That's two different interpretations of the separation of church and state. I think it's a little bit naive.
I concede that I was wrong, and thank you for providing an example that wasn't rooted in religion.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to Socrates and then Joe.
Yes. So just in fairness to Prime and the chat, because this was a topic about the school district and these policies, just gonna have some real quick polling. So raise your hand if you've got a problem with cultural competency training. First one. Okay, cool.
Cool.
Raise your hand if you've got a problem with having like a more centralized, better like tracking of like hate incidents. This is apparently something that like wasn't being done well. This wasn't actually being like recorded and kept track of. So
Oh, what? Sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Hate incidents.
Like kids on the bus saying the N-word, right?
Exactly. Those
like
were
we
incidents
mentioned
that
before.
weren't
Yeah,
being
that's
tracked.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No problem with that. If there's any issue with creating spaces for open conversations between students, other students, faculty, etc., about racial tensions at the school. Any issues with that?
Okay, no
Okay.
objection, but I just want to say, like, that's what needs to happen. Because you're going to have people like me who say, I was raised with this cultural standard. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. I have interpersonal fucking beefs with some things that I've seen. I want to be able to voice my objections. And I don't care if I'm judged or if I'm attacked, but I want to be able to like actually forthrightly argue the objections and then try to be productive moving forward and have the productivity, the North Star being cultural competence and actual mutual understanding. I think that has to be the North Star, not fucking this honky doesn't believe in fucking systemic racism. He's a fucking piece of shit. Let's cancel him.
Yeah. And then just one fourth, last one, which is probably going to be the last, most contentious, which is having increased hiring of, I think they use the language diverse faculty. But you could maybe make it more specific of having more faculty who matches the like cultural or ethnic background, whatever, of the students who are now there. Just quick hand raise for that. Anybody?
I don't have a contention, but I do think that the other solutions that you listed should take top priority, because I think that solution, even if it's irrational, even if it's totally irrational, it creates a lot of it's harder to advocate for, basically.
Okay,
Like it's
so
so
just-
much
yeah.
harder that like, yeah, but I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. So just really quickly, like one thing to advocate for that, and in terms of specifically the way that they talked about, is more along the lines of removing barriers to more diverse faculty coming in. When you have a very fast demographic shift in terms of workplaces, hiring more people who are not the kind of like majority groups can be difficult. So more along the lines of removing barriers to that when that could be something that could be an issue
So,
to allow for that to happen.
Something before we miss it. Killer and Counter, you had a problem with the diversity aspect?
Killer. Mine's really brief because it's kind of shit posty. I'm okay with diversity quotas as long as we also make it gendered. Okay, so I think we looked up the statistics on it. Educators are like 7-to-1 women. I want to make it fucking 50-50. You gotta fucking you want the fucking boys back in school. Fucking suck it up, Buttercup. We're gonna use fucking intersectionality to get the boys back in school.
Killer. You have?
I mean, I like what Counterpoint sort of said is like the shitposty way of saying it. I think the biggest problem that I have with it, and I haven't really been able to talk to people about diversity quotas, but I'd much rather be hiring people based on competency and stuff like that. And I don't think that I understand that having people that have a similar cultural background as to certain percentage of students for staff could be a good insight. But at the same time, I don't like the fact that like I can't get a job or go somewhere because they go, look, sorry, dude, you come from a white culture, and we're looking for people from an Asian culture. Or
Okay, just
quickly,
I need to correct the record.
I want to say
because
something.
no,
not gonna help.
Stop. No.
Okay.
Okay.
Socrates, you can respond, and then Joe, because I know Joe can also respond to all this.
Yes. So just really quickly. So quotas, I'm pretty sure never shows up as like at all. Like there's no quotas. I don't think that was ever included within what they wanted to do. It's literally, let's try to hire more diverse people. Like, this is what our student body looks like now. Yeah.
So Joe, please handle that.
I'm gonna try my best. There's a lot to unpack here. I was walking my girlfriend out, and I changed the audio, and I was hearing Kevin saying things, and my girlfriend looking back, what the fuck? I'm like, just keep walking. We'll deal with it later.
Did you tell her that we love her when you kissed her goodbye? That you say that?
Yeah, she's a good sport.
Okay. Right.
I'll address a few, like, I guess, key things I heard. Because I also want to respond to something that Killer said from earlier, right? We can understand that the United States is different from other nations. I think that's an okay thing to recognize and understand. The problem is when you get deeper in the weeds in terms of the ideology behind that, right? Is that one of the things that people who do support what I'm describing, which is American exceptionalism, is this idea that there's sort of like equality before the law. And something that the United States has done an incredibly poor job at, pretty not pog, is making sure that people are equal citizens before the law. And then you'll hear the response of like, name me an example of when like their people aren't like equal before the law. Like, here's the thing, LGBTQ plus folks are not protected under the Civil Rights Act. And then when we have a bill, the Equality Act, which was introduced, I think in 2017 initially, and we're still having conversation about it, and it just got voted on and passed the House, we still have people fighting tooth and nail over religious exemptions. So we understand that we have a few individuals, like a decent handful of individuals that are equal before the law. But then when you look at the nitty gritty, there's a bit more that has to be done there. And what we try to do through the law is reduce these poor outcomes for these individuals. But there seems to be a particular side who wants to make sure that doesn't happen. No different than the same side that wants to make sure that competency training doesn't happen in the United States. And when it comes to culture, right, like the thing that I use in terms of my working definition for culture is beliefs, practices, modes of a particular people in a particular setting adopted as a means of survival. Now, usually, like, as Kobe and I went back and forth about like what it means for survival, like that was the one part of the definition that he and I like are not, I'll say a disagreement of, but like probably needs to be a bit more specific in terms of what we're talking about. The example that I can give you in terms of like a historical context is just what was going on with two emerging ideologies within Black Americans, especially during Reconstruction. You had two concepts of minds, which was separatism and integrationalism. If you want to look at separatism, you can look no further than Booker T. Washington, where he advocated, like, look, we understand that these laws are not made for us, but we want to just leave us alone. Leave us alone, leave us to our own devices, and we'll handle ourselves and our communities. That's all well and good, but you still have to function within the systems of the United States. So the contradiction of that is, how are we supposed to create a separate nation or a separate society, separate from the United States, when you're within the United States itself, you would have to cater to white Americans in terms of building your schools and your infrastructure. Like, where are you going to get the wood for your buildings? Where are you going to get the teachers to fill your schools? Where are you going to get the educational materials to teach your kids in these schools? Where are you going to get the money for your banks? Where are you going to get the money to build the infrastructure?
sure.
All these things are factors. Sorry. And then you have the other side of it was W.D. Du Bois of integrationalism and the idea of individuals coming together of all creeds and all things, and all things and beings and few and far between. But the problem there is that how do we, as Black Americans, enter into a society where we understand that these laws are not created for us? So, okay, let's change the laws. Let's change the laws incrementally in order so we enter into a just society. And both of these ideologies have problems, but these ideologies only came about because of the ideas of things like American exceptionalism, of the idea of America not treating its people as equal citizens. And like, fast forward, right? If we're talking about what was going on in the school, and this is the last thing, in terms of cultural competency, one of the problems that, actually, let me drop that and answer Killer's question directly, because he did ask a question about parenting programming. One thing that I advocate for is active community involvement that goes not only from the teachers and the students, but to the parents as well. So parents need to also be within these learning and educational sessions in terms of understanding what cultural competency means, what your child is going about and being socialized within the school, so you don't run into these weird sort of parental deprogramming things. Again, this comes with community involvement, because one of the things is that parents don't go to, not that they don't go to, but the attendance of things like parent teacher conferences, like parent teacher like just discussion sessions and educational sessions, is based solely on the community that you're from. So while I think that all parents should be community involved in terms of understanding what's going on in the schools, a lot of parents don't do that. I think something that you can do in terms of prescription policy is including it in things like parent-teacher conferences, making it so that your parents have to attend these things. It's not like, again, if we understand that like your child's education is incredibly important, then you ought to go to these things to make sure you're helping your child the best way that you can.
I'm surprised that in all of that you didn't directly address the whole thing about affirmative action. I'm surprised that did not happen. But oh my God.
I mean, it's fine. Affirmative action is fine.
Okay, great work.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We'll go to Connor, then we'll go to Socrates.
Yeah, so this is something, again, poking at wounds, but that's because I love you guys and I feel comfortable enough to poke at wounds with people I respect and admire. So this is one of the things, though. So defensive white fragility honky shit coming out right now. I understand that basically there's a narrative, or there's competing narratives in the United States of America, and the one that I was raised on, again, in the 90s, was basically like, we were always going to get here, right? We were always going to fight for equality. We were always going to include everybody, Black people, Hispanic people. We were always going to treat each other as equals. But what ended up happening was we had a few assholes, we had a few flies in the honey that needed to be scooped out. But if you look at the framework of the Constitution, you know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Basically, we set up our own, like MLK said, like, you know, history has like a long arc and it bends towards justice or some shit like that. So basically, like, that's a narrative that I was raised with. And even if the narrative is incorrect, it's still a decent fucking narrative where it says we fucked up in the past, but we can be better. We have these ideals that we have constantly failed, but we can fight to fulfill these ideals over time and over space. And I would like to say I'm sorry. I am not a religious person, but I was raised in a religious household. I'm sorry that fucking, white people basically didn't view Black people as equals. I'm sorry that they didn't view Native Americans as equals and fucking savages, and they fucking purged them. I'm sorry that LGBTQ folk have basically been fucked over, and we are now probably, with trans folk, we are probably now in 2021 where we were in 2006, 2004, where in the younger generation and in some subsets of adults, it was acceptable to be trans, but there's still a pervasive larger community that just rejects it, okay? So I'm sorry that's the world that you live in, and I'm sorry that people like me have fucked you over. However, we could communicate with each other. We could talk about these ideals that somebody wrote down 300 years ago, how we failed these ideals, and how we want to improve upon them in the future. And that's where I want to go. And if you don't want to go with me, then that's kind of like my tribalism. My tribalism is like freedom of speech, right to conscience, right to self-defense, limited government. It's basically like liberalism with a spine. So if you're not a part of that tribe, I'll fight you. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, can I push back on one thing, Connor, that you said? It's a
Sure.
really it's a simple thing. Like, and the one thing that I think white Americans could do right now as a prescriptive policy is to stop apologizing for being racially identified and identifiable. And what I mean by that, to open up a little bit wider, is that we have to, in terms of conversations, right? Understand that race is not a side dish, is a feature within what it is to be American. And then like you brought up, like, have those uncomfortable conversations. Like, talk about, like, have a firm understanding that although on its face the Civil War was about states' rights, but when you look a little bit deeper, it was about the upholding of either slaveholding interests and non-slaveholding interests. And then through additional compromises, as we expanded, there's another conversation there. Like when we talk about expanding westward and the individuals who are currently living there, that's another part of the conversation. And then we have all these compromises that lead to things like the Dred Scott decision, which then accelerated into the Civil War. I think
So
I agree with you.
I want to bring this back into like what Socrates is trying to do, like back into the actual. We went far afield. There.
I was gonna respond to that,
though.
but I'll curb that and then and instead talk about my other for people who
no, you know what, you go first, and then I have other questions on this particular topic.
Mm-hmm. So for people who aren't sold on increased diversity hiring, or for people who aren't sure how to sell kind of diversity hiring to other people, if we recognize that cultural competency is a training that we want and a skill set that we want to impart to educators, if we recognize that that's valuable. So first of all, within what they said is they want to hire diverse, like qualified, diverse staff, educators, faculty, whatever, right? So they need to be qualified enough, whatever. That doesn't go out the window. But something that we can recognize is that being having a skill set, which is a different arrays of cultural competency, is actually something that adds to the value of an educator. Right, so this is something that we can have seminars on, we can have conversations about. But if you haven't grown up in a background, we have to recognize that in the same way that, like, you know, learning a language as like a, you know, your second, third language or whatever, rather than a native speaker, it could take a while, and you may not get it as strongly, as clearly as somebody who has that background. And also, given that within every diverse group, so that 14% of Asians that now make up that portion of the school body, within that, obviously there's a diverse level of backgrounds. So hiring one like Asian teacher doesn't necessarily capture like the array, or, you know, even like a, you know, a decent portion of the array of like what it means to be Asian American. If you have like 3 educators, maybe you have some shot of having some faculty on staff who could talk to a parent and actually have like a really direct relation in terms of their background or their culture that they were brought up with. And that's valuable. That's a minimum bar. That's very, very, there's a lot of utility in reaching that and exceeding that.
Listen, bud. Racism is over. We had a yellow Power Ranger, okay?
Oh, shit. So, yeah, you're right.
It's done.
So
that's right.
Going back to this, and thank you for that, Socrates. I think that's one of the good reasons why it's important.
Red Communist Ranger.
And yeah, to like, I don't know, I feel like what Killer needs to be said was directed. It needs to be addressed directly, like simply like white men not having opportunity directly because they're white is not like a thing, right? Now
Oh,
because of their socioeconomic
Okay, wait. Flip the
status.
race then.
So it's because their socioeconomic status, like you can have poor white men who don't have opportunities, right? Living in areas that there's just no investment in, like the Rust Belt, all that stuff. But just because they are white, no. I gotta put that out there.
all right. So in 2050, when whites become a minority inside the United States of America, can we start having racial quotas for white employment?
Hell
Yes,
yeah, brother.
yes,
Well,
we
No,
will
I mean,
absolutely
just so
do
we're
that.
clear,
100% for you.
if the script is flipped, they'd be protected under the Civil Rights Act and among all other
Okay.
acts. But
No,
you
no,
also
I'm,
be-
Fuck yeah,
well, but
absolutely.
I'm
what's really
looking. I'm
important
looking for a
here-
yes or no because I'm.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
looking forward.
Sure.
I'm
He's
looking
right.
forward to
Sure, buddy.
2050 because I'm gonna start bitching
Go
so
ahead.
fucking
but-
hard.
Dude,
Go ahead.
dude, I have the
Connor,
greatest idea.
Connor, there's something
Holy
that I
shit.
think is important that you're knocking at, which is that what we're seeing now is the challenges of things like the Civil Rights Act, like the Voting Rights Act. So when these things like pre-clearance is stripped from the Civil Rights Act, or the Voting Rights Act, excuse me, then how is that going to affect white Americans when they are considered racial or ethnic minorities?
So
Oh,
yeah,
don't
all
worry.
right.
If-
We'll fix it.
Again,
Yeah.
pre-clearance
like that,
is
'cause we're
pre-clearance is the
white.
idea that states have to appeal to the Attorney
So-
General if their voting laws are inherently racist. That
okay.
doesn't exist anymore.
So I wanna give Killer a chance to respond.
Well, my only thing, sure, okay, fine, Prime. It's fine to say that maybe my group's not oppressed. I get it. But all I'm saying essentially is you can take whatever race, put it in a variable, and choose whatever you think is the most oppressed group. And I just don't find it comfortable for you to be selectively choosing people based on their race just because you want to match a certain demographic in the school. I find it might be making us take steps backwards, and I don't want that.
Yeah, and to direct Killer directly, the Supreme Court agrees with you that what you just described is not allowed. What is allowed, however, is making sure that hiring processes are expansive enough to include as many people as possible. That's allowed through
So-
hiring processes.
So my question to that with the hiring process, is it just really talking about increasing the outreach of the hiring process? So you
Yes.
are more trying to grapple, make sure that you're
Yeah.
grappling a certain demographic, and maybe you can choose someone within that demographic.
Yes, and also making sure that the resources are available for these individuals to apply for these positions. Like one of the things within, and this varies from university to university, when they expand their search for a certain individual, for certain professors, is making sure that it's reached out in everywhere that it can within the community that you're looking to pull from. One of the problems is that sometimes I shouldn't say administrations, but departments within these programs have an idea of who they want in the first place. And it's like, no, hang on, this needs to be an expansive process in order not to only find the candidate that we're trying to fit our needs, but then also making sure that individuals have equal opportunity in terms of applying for these positions in the first place. Like we have thousands of HBCUs that spit out competent educators. In fact, I would argue overly competent educators. And then when it comes to the actual application process, they're not given the right resources in order to apply for these jobs. And that's something that's not, and this is something that has been acknowledged in the HBCUs as a problem, where like you get all of the applications for within the HBCU system, but you don't get the outreach of seeing like, oh, these are job openings within universities and colleges that aren't HBCUs. Like not just because somebody goes to an HBCU doesn't mean they want to exist within that ecosystem educationally their entire career. Like they want to be able to expand and stuff like that. And that's one part of affirmative action that I think is a good thing.
No, I mean, thank you for clearing that up, because I think a lot of people, including a lot of centrist conservatives before that, it's just it comes off wrong when, no offense, Prime, but what you said was very provocative, and I literally have never really had a chance to talk about this subject with someone in such a way that they could actually get the point across. Either I get, no offense, Prime, what you said, or someone that shuts me down and I never get to understand the subject.
Yeah. Something to remember too, right, is that and this is to no fault of anyone, I would say, in my opinion, where members of disenfranchised groups in the United States have to have these conversations a lot. And then what happens is you'll run into different groups of individuals. You'll run into like the me and primes who will like, I'm here for as long as it takes. As somebody who talks to redneck and CTV on the regular, as long as it takes, my friend. But for a trans American, right, having extended conversations with not CTV, but with redneck as an example is, I don't know if you know who that is. He's very cringe when it comes to trans rights. But like for someone like that, like for someone like me talking to redneck, that's a bridge too far for some, and that's okay. I think what tends to happen is what you just described, is that sometimes you might see the back end of somebody having this conversation too many times and having to explain it in different ways. I don't know if
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
helps or
can
hurts
I want to play right-wing translator for a second, not for anything that was just said, but in general. It feels like sometimes when we're in these conversations, lefties or progressives are trying to like change like right-wing fundamental axiomatic beliefs. Like you don't believe this thing, therefore you're a fucking piece of shit, you're a bad person, and you should not be a part of the conversation. Whereas a more realistic goal that I think is more proximate is basically saying like, hey, here's my perspective on the situation. This is the compromise that I need in order to feel like I can exist safely within the world. Is this a compromise that you can accept, even if we have fundamental axiomatic philosophical disagreements? And like oftentimes when I'm like, hey guys, fuck the axioms, fuck the philosophy, is this like a solution or a compromise that we can accept as a society where it's like, like I don't recognize like the gender ideology, but I'll accept your pronouns because I want to be polite, or like the racial thing, like, oh, I don't think systemic racism exists, but at the same time, like police corruption and police brutality is a fucking problem, and I want to work with you for fucking police accountability and brutality. You have to take the fucking W where you can find it, okay? And you don't have to like change somebody's fundamental axiomatic philosophical perspectives in order to get policy passed or for your worldview to become more prevalent in the real world. So that's what I would say, is because like I'm sure that Prime and Joe and I could sit in a fucking room, talk about history in America and specifically Black history in America, and I'm like 2 or 3 of us will be crying and screaming by the fucking end of the conversation. But that doesn't fucking fix problems, right? Like we got to focus on the fucking problems and focus on the solutions.
All right, go ahead. We'll go layman and then Kobe.
Yeah, just to add on to what Connor said, like that is incredibly important because, and this is why Joe is the only good progressive. So basically,
progressive now? Jesus Christ! That was
or whatever you are.
Oh, the tanky 2 weeks ago.
That's progress.
Hey, progressive better than tankies. I mean,
When will you become the conservative? You're just moving to the right.
I misspoke once about Kurdish people, and then I turned into a Soviet sympathizer. I'm quite experienced.
Slippery slope this way, my friend.
Yeah. No, but what I wanted to say is that's actually really important when it comes to advocacy. So something that you did just now, Joe, that I really fucking loved is rather than talking to Killer as though he holds the exact same like morality as you do, you framed things to him in a way that appealed to his, I guess you could say, motivated reasoning, or appealed to his concerns and his axioms. And that's actually what you have to do, literally, to like change people's minds and shit, basically. Or maybe change minds is the wrong word, like move people over to a position. That is how you do it. If you don't do it that way, people are just gonna remain within their own confirmation bias, which is how a lot of these conversations go, which is why you see study after study of people who are told a certain position is wrong when they're presented evidence, and they're like, oh fuck, I don't give a fuck, my feelings, you know? But when you appeal to people's motivated reasoning, it actually fixes that. So that's just a really important like rhetorical thing to know, and I think just, Joe, you fucking nailed it right there, so. Yeah.
Kobe.
Yes, gaslight me more, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Fucking
So, like,
pinky scum.
I don't remember who it was. I'm not sure if it was like officially part of the question, but a while ago the kind of question was posed like, how do we sell this like diversity training slash affirmative action kind of stuff? Like how do like why like, to people? And I think that actually, we could learn from the great Chairman Mao when he said, "Never forget class struggle." I think many times making things very simple and trying to make things very broad, make things very understandable is very good for this. So I linked something in the chat. Boys are doing bad in school. There's actually an updated study on this, but boys across schools in Western countries are doing worse than girls. They have less attendancy, less graduation, less chance of going to high college. That's not good. We need more. We need more boys. We got to figure that out. One of the ways we're going to probably have that is probably having more positive male role models in certain high schools. When I went to high school, there were certain like every single one of our English teachers were girls instead of one. Now, I liked them all. They're fantastic teachers. Nothing wrong with them. But sometimes in some communities, you're going to need to have some affirmative action, and I think that'd be good. I think that I think that sometimes we focus a little bit on. It's good to focus on race, but I think that many times we can sell race-based affirmative action by pointing out that affirmative action can be good in other sectors, and we can kind of like tack it on, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. So yeah, if I could just address that really directly, like this is where I think that right wingers are really missing an opportunity when it comes to intersectionality, is because like this knife cuts in every fucking direction. Okay, yeah. It cuts through class, it cuts through gender, it cuts through socioeconomic status, it cuts through culture, second languages. That basically what it is it's an analysis of all the variables that make up a human being and how they cross-section into fucking groups and how some groups don't do as well as other groups in certain fields. That's literally like the definition of intersectionality. That can be, I don't want to say inverted, but it can be used as a sociological analysis to see where your tribe, your people are doing poorly and to advocate for them to do well. I don't just care about white straight men, but I do care about white straight men. So I could basically say, hey, disproportionately we have female educators, disproportionately we have female nurses, or women nurses and women educators. This is an aspect of society that could benefit from a man's influence, and we should use the analysis of intersectionality to basically advocate for a better cross-section of humanity to be involved in this frame of the world. And here are all the benefits, and here's all the negatives, and all that kind of stuff. And that's where... just another example, consent culture. Conservatives were so ready to fucking dunk on lefties for consent culture that they didn't realize that it's basically a conservative argument for sexuality. Yeah. It's literally, don't do the sex thing unless the other person wants to do the sex thing with you. That's a conservative fucking argument, but Steven Crowder was so ready to fucking dunk on fucking progressives that he didn't even recognize it as a conservative W. So, anyways.
So, another question I wanted to tackle with this, and I don't know, I feel like there's so much more to talk about the affirmative action thing. I think, of course it is, because that's always a hot topic, so it's what it is. What is like the message being sent to that community in terms of? So, what happened was, and for those of you who didn't see the article about this, is that there were these incidences that we had talked about before about like white kids like screaming the N-word, right? Multiple times, shouting it, chanting it, right? But that kicked off like a whole like committee that looked into like what should be done, and then it also had these town halls, right? These town halls in which the parents of minority students and minority students themselves shared their stories. And their stories were full a lot of bigotry in that town, right? A lot of bigotry was happening there. So what's the message that's actually sent when you elect a conservative slate that says, no, like we hear your stories, but we will take no action on this. And in fact, the action that you have trying to take is going to somehow enshrine racism to white students. That's how the article put it. Enshrine racism to white students by having like cultural competency courses. So like what's the message there? Sorry, Nine Tails.
Yeah, so I said Sorry, I'm having issues with my mute.
I said Nine Tails.
I unmuted myself before, but then my mic was muted. So then I unmuted my mic, but then you started talking. So then I didn't unmute myself. So then I just muted myself now. So that was really fun. Okay. So as far as your question, the message, can you ask like what specifically, what are we sending by doing again? Because I was kind of half distracted. I do have another response for Connor after this as well. That's why my hand was up.
Okay, well, you just respond to Connor, and then I'll go back
Okay,
to my
sure.
question.
Okay, so yeah, just gonna point out that the right wing didn't like, have a reaction to things like consent culture simply because the left did it. They also did it because it challenges the entitlement of white males who have grown up learning that like you're the salt of the earth. You don't actually have to ask for entitlement because she's into you. Therefore, the consent is implied because you're that important. Now, nobody ever directly said that, but this is like toxic masculinity at play. And then as soon as you challenge that, because that toxic masculinity embodies so much entitlement for young men, as soon as you challenge that, the reaction is actually to the loss of potential value that bringing this up creates for them.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So to respond to that directly, basically, yeah. And there's multiple subsets of cultures. Oftentimes, when people talk about American culture, there's a whole bunch of subsets. Conservative Christian culture would never advocate for the kind of sexuality that you're talking about, and the sexuality that you're talking about is basically the American pie sexuality. It's women are not women. They are experiences. They are conquests. They are things to be had and to be disposed of as quickly as possible. And as a matter of fact, your evaluation as an individual man is how many women you can trick into fucking you and then ditching them as quickly as possible. That's the American pie culture. That's the culture I was raised in. My parents basically did everything except for kick me in the actual penis to tell me that that's toxic, it's fucked up, it devalues women, it's not in line with our Christian moral values, it's not in line with what we want for you as a human being. We want you to find a nice girl, we want you to court her for 6 months at a time, we want you to gain her trust and her consent, meet her family, get married, settle down. Obviously, I'm not advocating for that shit. That's fucking way too far. But at the same time, my point is that this toxic masculinity is not a monolith. And very specifically, when we're talking about trying to beat down some of the more toxic and nefarious aspects of hookup culture, consent culture is actually really good at getting rid of some of the more nefarious portions of hookup culture.
Great.
I'll agree that
I do want to actually focus on the actual topic.
Marriage culture.
I do want to focus on the actual topic. Again, we're going far afield. We keep doing this. It keeps happening.
I mean, I try.
It's because it's beautiful.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Joe, if you have a response to like the topic or the question I raised?
Can you repeat your question one more time?
Yeah, sure. So talking about how like we have a situation where these students came out and discussed all the pains they've been experiencing, all the bigotry they've experienced in this very much Republican district, right? And basically the town said, fuck it, doesn't matter. Like we actually aren't going to take any action against it. And the action and this diversity plan is going to enshrine racism against white students.
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's a very simple policy prescription that black Americans do in situations like this. They fucking leave. Forehead, unironically, but not. So you'll see a couple of waves of these things happening. I'll use Prop 209 as an example, right? So way back in summer of '96, back when it was climate change, it wasn't global warming, or was it? I don't fucking know. I went to school for music, but basically what California did was they fully eliminated state government's use of affirmative action. And this effort was spearheaded by a cocksucker named Ward Connerly, a prominent black opponent of affirmative action. What did we see in the process right after that? Fucking things tanked. In UCLA, the minority population dropped from 28% to 14% from 1995 to 98. And a similar drop happened at UC Berkeley. What we'll see in a situation like this is kind of what we're already seeing in the statistics of the town. For the group that is affected the most by this, you're going to see the adjustment in their demographic. That's why I acknowledge that you saw a 0.8% drop when it comes to Black Americans in that community. And this is the sentiment of parents, where if the school system is not going to make sure that my kid's needs are being met, then I'm going to pull them out by any means necessary. Now, just so that we're incredibly clear here, when we talk about South Lake is rich as fuck. Rich as fuck. It is voted numerous times as one of the best places to raise a kid in the United States. However, not every American is going to have the ability to just up their kid and their family from their community just to move to an area where their child might see good educational outcomes. What you'll see, which happens a lot of the times, is that Black students are going to, sadly, it just have to hold that. And that's not fair. It's not fair to Black students. It's not fair to Hispanic students. It's not fair to Asian students, and it's especially not fair to white students because these outcomes are going to continue and perpetuate themselves. And what is the parent supposed to do? Like, if the school system is not going to have your child be met academically in a way that you think is appropriate from a social environment, they'll pull their kid out. But not every school district or every parent in the United States is able to have that experience.
Socrates, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, so just quickly to I feel like there's some kind of vague ideas that we have generally about like what like diversity hiring or quotas or whatever is. So just to be clear, in terms of this particular case, we're not talking about affirmative action in the sense of we want more teachers to like come into leadership positions and be able to, you know, kind of do whatever for the community in that regard. What this is about serving the students. So about having more staff that is able to help the students better. And so just to name off a couple of what those action steps actually are, research the hiring practices of other school area districts, identify best practices in recruiting, rewarding, retaining qualified, diverse staff, adopt a written HR plan designed to recruit, reward, retain diverse, etc. In each category, professional, paraprofessional, and auxiliary. So participate in job fairs at colleges with more diverse applicants, focus on the hiring of quality applicants with an emphasis on decreasing the number of underrepresented teachers, right? So it's more about outreach. It's more about removing barriers, having good HR practices that retain these teachers as well. I just want to be really clear about what this specific school district is trying to do is not some weird kind of quota. Like, it's not even affirmative action in the sense of we need more. We want to help the teachers out. It's about helping the students.
Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, so basically, I think Joe communicated what was being communicated to minority folks who lived in this community where the training was rejected. But I'll tell you what white people are being told. White people are being told that affirmative action exists for everybody but white people. So even when we become a racial minority in the group, like in the country, it won't be extended to us. The level of charitability won't be extended to us. We'll basically become a minority group. We'll become a new oppressed class, and nobody will give a shit because of like historic analyses of racism and all that kind of shit. Also, what is being said. Jesus Christ, guys! I'm being descriptive, not prescriptive. It's also being said that this education is going to teach anti-white hatred to young people. Basically, brown and black students will be told, "Hey, all of your fucking problems, everything that's ever gone wrong in your life, is white people, and it's white people's fault that everything sucks." And I'll also tell you, so this is all descriptive, not prescriptive. So I'll also tell you something that happens on Facebook all the time, because I am still in a majority of the right-wing groups that I was in 2016, and oh my God, they're fucking brutal. So when lefties, progressives, make fucking Mayo side memes, when they talk about killing white people or any of that kind of shit, it gets screenshot, it gets snipped, the engagement, the retweets, and the likes are removed from the fucking snip. That way you can't tell how popular a post is, or God forbid the post is popular, the stats are included. That's worse. And then it's snipped and it's posted into Facebook groups without any context, any sense of irony, any sense of humor. And it says, this is the game plan. Everybody in this fucking country hates you. Everybody thinks you're a fucking piece of shit. They're gunning for you. Any kind of systemic any kind of systemic change for this country that helps brown and black people out is actually a lost sum gain to your detriment. And in 50 years, it is going to be open season on fucking white people. That's what's being said in the far right online.
Let's go to Killer.
I was just also going to say the one thing that I talk a lot about, because I've been talking to a lot more left-wing communities, is I don't know if the left, for being the group of HR departments and stuff like that, they are really shitty when it comes to their nomenclature and stuff like that. If you're going to market something, as far as I understand from what Socrates and Joe Lewis has told me about this bill and everything, it seems like most right-wingers would get along with it, except for the fact that they slap on very left-wing
Rhetoric.
rhetoric.
Like
yeah,
what?
thank you. And
Like what specifically?
rhetoric creates a backlash because they immediately have like this.
Like what specifically?
A white lash, if you will.
Yeah.
Sure, you can call it a white lash. Well, the first off, the name of the bill is gonna do it. I forget what the name is exactly.
What-
Or not the? Isn't that the name?
What are these
What was
terms?
the
What's
program
it?
in question is called? I'll pull it up for you.
It's called Draft Carroll ISD Cultural Competence Action Plan.
That's
Yeah,
anti-white. That's anti-white.
Is that
It
anti-white?
is.
Yeah, I
It
don't.
is.
Yeah, yeah. What,
Oh, sorry.
I'm-
And Mayo side.
and
No,
Mayo.
never mind. It's
There
not
we
the
go.
name, but racial. When you say things like racial diversity, when you say like diversity training and stuff like that, it immediately gives a kickback
Nope.
notion.
No,
These people
that's
get-
not in there. There's no diversity training.
Well, wait, hang
That-
on,
that
hang
verbiage.
on.
No,
Let
no,
Killer
but
go,
what he's
because
saying,
there's a
though-
point there. There's a point that he's alluding to, which I think
Yeah,
is important.
Go, Killer, go.
Okay.
I don't know the exact labels. Honestly, I'm going to give myself a little thing. I had an hour to prep for this panel, and I found out that was going on during work as an accountant, but you can't really prep and do people's taxes. Weird
I mean,
thing.
you can. It's just
Yeah,
not
but
Yeah,
I think it was-
So
but then,
what
but
I-
then why? But,
sorry.
but then I guess to your point, then why did you think this was? And it's fine. You didn't get a chance to, because people come in last minute, and we thank you all for being here, every single one of you. But then why did you immediately think that this was a thing that would set white people off, and specifically come up with the? Because even if it's not in the bill, it's something that you think is something that would be make white people angry. Why does something diversity training make white people angry?
Well, I think a lot of it is, well, ContraPoints actually alluded to this a lot, is you get people that clip, and it's not even most left-wing communities. There's a lot of them that are pretty friendly, but someone will say something like white genocide, or someone will do some cringy actual diversity training, and that one clip
Coca-Cola.
circles across all the right-wing sphere, and the whole right-wingers just take that and use that as the average, or what all the lefties are doing. And yes, you could say it is a logical fallacy and stuff like that, but it doesn't mean that they don't all fall for it. And when you're trying to convince a community that this is not that, you shouldn't be using the same imagery or rhetoric or things like that the community has been seeing as this anti-left hate against them.
So killer. Understanding that, right? So let's go back to what ContraPoint said, not contra, but counter. The better one, honestly, right? But
there's two
Unironically, yes.
No, you're wrong. Prime, you're
There's
still wrong.
contra,
so
there's
yeah.
ContraPoints, and then there's counterpoints,
Wrong.
which is ours.
I thought they were alter egos.
But no. But okay, but going back to what he said, right? Saying that, like, well, these things will get clipped, right, and then associated with those programs, right? So, like, if we come up with another name, right? So you're saying, like, oh, this is a marketing issue, right? You're using names that have already been poisoned. Well, what stops, like, these bad actors? And I don't think we can probably agree that these people are bad actors. What stops them from poisoning the new term, right? When they just do the same thing?
I mean, you have a great point there. It's just simply, I think a lot of it's also like a time game and stuff like that. In the end of the day, we all know people like, I guess a great example that's been recent, like Mel. I probably wouldn't be posting her stuff as like a thing right next to what I'm trying to sell, whether it's a good advertisement or not. And at the same time, things can only spread so fast. And you see this a lot. I actually think that Joe Biden is actually very magnificent when it comes to shutting down a lot of the right to rhetoric on a lot of things. when it came to his speech with the gun control talk, you saw him immediately use a lot of the right rhetoric against them in a lot of ways, and immediately shut down what they'd scream about. And you immediately see a lot of aftermath things, and it was a whole bunch of nothing and pretty actually sad. And I think people can learn a lot about Joe Biden's rhetoric, actually, and I think that he's pretty good when it comes to the left. He's actually a good example I use.
Oh boy. Oh, anyway, I'll just leave it alone. But no, thank you for that.
Joe Biden's
Kevin,
good.
I'll fight
Well, speechwriters.
I like
from
Joe
a
Biden.
filthy centrist like you, of course. Go ahead, Kevin, please.
He's great.
Thanks, Prime. I just wanted to touch on the optics a little bit. I think optics are a good thing to note. I mean, it's always a tough one, you know. Like in my community, for example, we deal with an optics issue because we got this anti-trans bigot, we got this homophobe, we got this guy that like nobody in the hot community agrees with, yet he's using a NATO flag as his profile picture, and he's a huge Erdogan fan. And yet he's supposed to, like, he's basically being tweeted out as like, oh, look at the Hawks, look at the NATO guys. It's like we don't support this, yet the optics of this one individual reflect poorly on our entire community when we're for humanitarian intervention. And so I think in the case of, you know, when we're talking about the optics of male side, or, you know, not even necessarily just the super far left, not even just that. You can look at the neoliberals in general and the war on the suburbs and all this kind of rhetoric that's out there. It's really, it really turns people off. And I'm not excusing people like Crowder or anything here, but the thing that those people are good at is capitalizing on people's not wanting to be associated with that kind of stuff, and then they offer them an alternative to it, which, you know, in their case, I'm not a fan of Crowder. It's oftentimes basically this, oh, you get to be anti-progressive and anti-neoliberal, so let's be racist and troglodytes, and that's what they offer. And so when you do bad optics, what you got to understand is that you're basically giving your enemy ammunition, right? So thanks.
Okay.